what you're describing, economic collapse due to hyperinflation because of us printing 40% of our money in the last year, that directly correlates with food stamps, unemployment benefits, unemployment percentage, all of these things. Because when the stock market crashes and our money inflates, people are going to lose their jobs.
Yep.
And unless the government's there with the boo-boo Band-Aid to start handing out checks.
Which sucks because they're printing money to do that. The Band-Aid that they're using is printed money. So money. You can see how that could create a really nasty cycle.
Negative feedback loop.
Facts.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this. And totally redeem yourself.
Welcome back, Internet. We are the three averagely intelligent dudes discussing dangerous ideas, and today we are going to discuss a couple of things that are related. They're related. We're going to go through the hyperinflation of our economy and the eventual economic crash that Rod predicts.
Looking dark out here.
We're going to talk about the social safety net and the amount of people that are homeless, on food stamps, or accepting unemployment benefits. And then Mac is going to show us why the current solutions our government has are just a big bowl of nonsense.
Yeah, it's quite the episode, and I think that you'll find very many takeaways from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it.
Lately, we've really been on the whole subject of the pandemic, trying to really solve this problem. It's been chaotic, to say the least, over the last couple of years. Yeah. And the government's been shelling out all these solutions, but nobody's really stopped and asked, like, is this the right thing to do? You know, like, are we offering the right solutions here? Because I think this happens all the time, even in our own personal lives and stuff. It's like, it's kind of like being a firefighter. You know, like, you're just constantly running around putting out fires that you're not really thinking about, like, fire prevention.
Yeah, there's no preventative
maintenance.
maintenance
Or
in
like,
our economy.
well, you know, how 20 years from now is all this consumption of water gonna, you know, like, affect us in a sense. So that's what I see with this pandemic. You know, I think a lot of us or not us, but the system reacted really quickly and was just like, yo, we got to do something about it. But so what have we been doing, right?
Printing money.
That's what we've been doing. That's exactly what we've been doing.
Good job, John.
I don't know. I didn't have the number quite off top, but I think we might know from our past episodes. You guys might know how much have we paid out in stimuluses and economic relief bills. Do you know?
Well, I know that this last bill was 1.9 trillion.
Yes, that's
and the bill before that was 1.7 trillion.
Yeah, I think
I'm not mistaken.
I think we're approaching somewhere around $4 trillion thrown at this.
So,
yeah.
It's a lot. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
And so for this topic, I'm gonna ask the question: where did that money come from?
Yes.
Where's all that gold? How did they get that much gold?
Where did $4 trillion come from? So lately, what's been happening a lot in the financial sector, economics and stuff is, and I follow this, you know, pretty regularly because I like to think of myself as like an investor and whatnot. You know what I mean? So, dude, it's been doom and gloom lately though. Like all the big guys, Ray Dalio, Steve Forbes, I'm talking Warren Buffett, all of them, Michael Burry, somebody we're going to talk to a lot. They've just been predicting economic collapse coming in the near future. And so I got to say I'm a little nervous, but I definitely am excited to turn you guys on to this.
In financial terms, this would be called being very bearish. The greatest financial minds this world has ever seen are all very bearish on our whole economy right now. Which means that they don't think that it's good.
And I think this is a key to it too. It's like when I see a lot of people are like, oh, I'm gonna get into Bitcoin and I'm gonna buy some GameStop and this and that, and I'm always like, look, to be like a really good investor or whatnot, you don't really want to be doing what everybody else is doing, right? Like if everybody's buying Bitcoin, chances are that's not where you really want to be. The whole point is to kind of be able to pick and choose those things ahead of time and to be ahead of the trend.
Right.
But a lot of times when you're getting onto it, by the time you're getting onto it and hearing about it, like you're kind of late. You know what I mean? You're kind of late.
Yeah.
If your mom's sitting there telling you that you should invest in Bitcoin, like your mom's late to things, dog.
Yeah,
like she's not
up on
yeah.
the financial games.
You know
I was telling you the other day, but I listened to a hunting podcast called the Meat Eater Podcast, and on this podcast, one of the guys that works for that company named Chester, he is using Bitcoin right now to get a walleye boat. Now, a walleye is a type of fish, and we had this whole conversation about how, like, you know, when dudes that are like get paid to hunt are talking about buying Bitcoin as a way to purchase a new fishing boat, Bitcoin's not looking too hot. That's not when you want to be buying Bitcoin.
My question is, how long is that entry period before it becomes cool? Like, you know, like
there's no definitive answer for that, but as they say, the best time to have invested in Bitcoin or plant a tree was 30 years ago. The next best time is today, but that really only applies to the tree. Yeah.
Now, because I'm pretty ignorant on Bitcoin in the sense of, like, I've never really looked at the trend too much. I understand what it is and how it works to an extent, but it's not really like something. I'm not a big economic guy. Mm-hmm. But when I've started following a Twitter handle of Bitcoin stimulus, and they every day they'll just put out a tweet and it'll be like, if you had invested your $1,400 stimulus that they gave you last year in like April or May or something like that, this is how much it would be worth now. Mm-hmm. And they do that with each one, the $600 one, the whatever. And it's like, it always makes me like skeptical because I'm like, really?
No. I'm glad that they're making that particular reference because that's something we're going to talk about a little bit when I start talking about, you know, this economic collapse, because a lot of these prices that we've seen with things with GameStop and Bitcoin
has to do with the stimulus.
It has to do with the stimulus, right? It's the fact that we're giving everybody in the country $1,400. But everybody in the country doesn't necessarily need $1,400, right? So we're getting a lot of people who kept their job, you know, are already wealthy, and they're getting all this extra money. And so it's like, well, what am I going to do with this extra money? Like, if you're smart, you invest it, right? And so you invest it in whatever you think is hot. So to answer your question, here's a chart of Bitcoin right now and how it's been trading since. This one's just going back. We're on a daily chart, so this one's going back to about June of last year. Where'd my mouse go here? Ooh.
I lost my mouse.
There it is.
There we go.
So this is May of 2020, right? Here goes August of 2020. We're going to see a little bump. This is where, you know, Bitcoin was like 11 or 12. And this was hot. Even people were still talking about Bitcoin back now because it had recently, before this, jumped up from about 5,000 to about 12,000. And everybody's like, oh, this is hot. It's 15. Here goes November of 2020. And
that was about second round stimulus,
right? And then here goes December 2020. I want to show you at the end of the year. So if you were by the end of the year, if you were invested in Bitcoin, Bitcoin was at about 28,000. Okay. Yeah. Well, this is already a steep incline. I mean, in a matter of 3 months, it went from 10K to 20K.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. But now since then, in the last 3 months, it's also gone up from 20K to as high as 60K. So, I mean, this is a quintessential bubble chart, okay?
Yeah. If you've ever heard the term of the housing markets in a bubble or the something markets in a bubble, this is what that looks like.
Yeah.
What it means is that it's being inflated artificially.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, everybody's catching on to like the hype trend.
It's a craze.
It's a hype trend. It's a craze. You know, like everybody's like all hyped up about it.
It's fidget spinners.
Yeah, and so it becomes this really big thing for a hot second.
It's Gangnam Style.
And then it goes away.
It's vaping.
Right.
Like it goes everywhere. Everybody's like, oh, you hear about this new thing?
It's the vape bubble.
Yeah. And so that's what's really happening. Bitcoin's been through one of these before, actually, in like 2016. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it got as high as like $1,600 or something like that at the time. But I mean, it went from pennies. Like Bitcoin went from like nothing,
worthless,
to like $1,600.
Can we see that, or is this?
I could probably pull that up, but it'll be a little tricky to do without doing some research. Just because I'm not logged in, and you have to have like, you have to pay for data. Yep. But you go back to 2016, and so there's this little spike. And now I'm still extremely bullish on Bitcoin, like as a general. 20 years from now, 30 years from now, right? Like Bitcoin's gonna be a big deal. But the problem is we're talking about short term. Right now, everybody's got this extra funds, this money, and a lot of people are just like, what do I do with this? And everywhere you look, people are saying, put it in Bitcoin, put it in GameStop. We're all doing the GameStop thing, or the stonks. You know, it's all about the stonks.
Yeah, get your stonks now, quick.
Yeah.
Reddit told me to buy some stonks.
And so we've seen a huge boom in the stock market. We've seen a huge boom in Bitcoin and other assets. And everybody's happy. It's exciting times. Everybody's always really excited in a bull market. A lot of people forget that prior to 2007, we were in a huge bull market. Everybody was making money on the housing and everything. Houses were going up like tremendously. And
people who really should be buying houses were buying houses.
Right? You know what I mean? Same thing with people who don't know anything about Bitcoin.
People who don't know anything
about anything or buying it just because some guy on a Reddit post told them that, it's the hot new shit.
And that's the problem, is it's like the FOMO, like that's what that Twitter is doing. That Twitter, the stimulus Bitcoin thing is like, if you had invested it a year ago, it'd be worth 10 times as much. And so that makes you think like, oh shit, I'm missing out on this Bitcoin thing. So you get in now, assuming that it's going to continue to keep rising up. But at some point, as we all know, things that go up must come down. Yeah, and so that's the tricky part, is that there is no definitive when should I get in, when should I get out. That's kind of the skill of being an investor. That's how you become a good investor, is knowing like, oh, now's the time to get in on this. And then when everybody's mom and a guy's trying to get it for a fishing boat, then you're like, okay, now's the time to get out.
So if you were somebody who got in on the first round of stimulus or something, you are living fat.
It's looking good.
And you have incentive to continue to try to convince other people to get in, because the more people buy Bitcoin, the more your price goes up. But just like when we talked about with the GameStop situation, where, it sounds interesting and exciting, but if you're only going on this, like, these group of people are going to artificially raise that, you don't know when these people are going to exit, and if you miss the tweet that says, hey, we're all jumping ship, you get caught holding the bag, essentially.
Right.
And so my whole point with this is that any point in investing in anything really is to buy low, sell high, right? Unless you're shorting things, which is a whole different story. But it's mostly that's what you want to do with your house. That's what Walmart does with the products that they sell you. They buy them cheap from China, and then they sell them to you at a higher price, right? So that's always the name of the game. But if you are the guy who comes schmucking in at $60K and you buy, what do you think happens to your money when Bitcoin plummets back down to 20K, right? There go all your money. You're broke now. Your shit just evaporated in your face, right? So we're in these bubbles though, and it's happening. And like I said, a lot of the big guys are trying to warn people. They're trying to tell us like, hey, look, these are not normal markets. It's cool, or they're normal, like it happens. Bubbles, crashes, all this stuff, it happens. Some people would argue that our fiscal policy over the last 50 years or so has created more of this. Like a very volatile market, as they say, where it does this bust and boom type situation. And people don't think that that's necessarily how it should operate, but we'll get into that.
Has there ever been something like this where it's like there is not is there a finite limit to the amount of Bitcoin, or is it based upon the mining? Now, can you mine it out, or is it something that you can mine forever?
So what happens with Bitcoin is there's only a finite amount, right, of Bitcoin. Now, different coins operate differently.
Yeah,
right?
Dogecoin, all these other ones.
They might have different capital or caps, and I don't know too much about all of those individually. But Bitcoin as itself, BTC, has a finite amount. I think it's like 23 million Bitcoins that will ever be in existence. Now, each one of those Bitcoins breaks down to like the 8th decimal point, really, really small. So you can continuously divvy it up, those 23 million, but they'll only be, it's not like currency where you could just keep on chucking them in the market.
Keep printing Bitcoins.
It's not going to ever happen like that. Once it's done, it's done. But the system is interesting in the sense of when you mined Bitcoin in the very beginning, it was easy to do. But as you get closer and closer to the 23 million, it becomes harder and harder for you to do it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting, actually.
It's very backwards to how things normally go.
Right, exactly. The computer solves this very intricate math problem in order to mine this Bitcoin, I guess, essentially. Like, get this little Bitcoin. It, like, gets a reward for solving this problem. And the problems get exponentially harder as it goes. And so, yeah, and that's why it's actually becoming harder and harder. Back in the day when it was early, you could mine Bitcoin from your home computer. But now the computing, the
processor.
It takes like a
power.
supercomputer
It takes
to
a
do it.
supercomputer in order to do it. So it's
and
becoming
honestly,
harder and harder to do.
the reason is because the computer technology that we had at the time when it was starting to solve these problems and the nature of the problems was such that it became, our computing power made it to where it was so easy to do up to a certain point, but our technology is not increasing fast enough. So like our computer processing technology is not is one, not it. There are computers that could do it faster. People just don't have access to them. They're like military computers and government computers and shit like that. So like you won't have those computers. And by the time that level of computing power comes down to our level, people who would want to mine Bitcoin, it'll be a while.
Yeah, like we're not just going to get quantum computing.
I think that there'll probably be a pause. There'll be like, we'll get to a point where the computers won't be able to solve the problems anymore, and then we'll have to like halt the mining of Bitcoin until computing process catches up to it, and then we can jump back into it.
I would be interested to see how much is already in circulation. Like, but here's the very interesting thing about this too. It can only actually get more valuable because you've heard stories of people like, you could store your Bitcoin on a hard drive and then lose that bitch.
And then it's
lost. Just gone forever.
Yeah, like, it's an NFT, right? Like it's like a thing that can't be duplicated.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it has its own unique signatures and all that stuff. So yeah, once it's gone, it's gone. You know what I mean? So we're only actually losing. It's kind of like gold. You know, it's like I said, that's what it's more synonymous with gold than it is like a cash currency.
Right. Yeah. It's like an asset, like silver or gold.
Right. And it's in our currency market. Like anybody can buy and sell this stuff.
Anybody can buy and sell Bitcoin at the moment. Yeah. You just get on any exchange, Coinbase or any of these things. And somebody was trying to get a little education on that. She was trying to use a Bitcoin ATM and stuff. And she's like, I'm like, just log in, use your debit card. You know, the only thing you need to be doing ATM and stuff is if you're trying to buy anonymously, which could be a thing. If you that's a little bit of extra process because a lot of these sites require you to register your information, your identity and stuff like that.
Because and I try to tell people about this a lot. Like, I'm not super bullish, which means that I think it's going to be like, in financial terms, bearish means that you think it's going to go down or negative, and bullish means that you think it's going to go up or being positive about something. I'm not very bullish on Bitcoin per se or any individual cryptocurrency. I am bullish on the idea of blockchain technology, which is what underlies the whole idea of Bitcoin, which is an open and free and open source ledger of this currency. That's what I like about it.
That's my favorite thing about it.
Yeah, is that like we said everybody can see how much Bitcoin you have, who you gave it to. Now, we might not know who that person is, like their identity, but we can see like IP address blah 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 received 10 Bitcoin from IP address blah 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 blah, and there's no way to fault that, like to fraud that.
It's like the secret ledger that got Paul Manafort hidden in the house in the Ukraine. It was like they just open it up and be like, we can see right here you got paid in Bitcoin, buddy. Yeah. We know who it came from.
But it's really cool technology because that's what opens up for things like NFT. You know, NFT is built on blockchain. People have talked about like in the future, houses, like titling companies, that will no longer exist. The whole titling company's job is to maintain that record and make sure that nobody can just sell somebody else's house, right? But soon your title will be on a blockchain and you won't need to go to no title company. It's like right there it is, I have it on. So blockchain's incredible. It gives you trust on the internet, which is something that we never had before. So it's huge. But nonetheless, either way, like you said, this is Michael Burry on what he thinks is about to happen with this whole situation.
Big short investor Michael Burry says that he'll stop tweeting after warning of market bubbles for months. So apparently he deleted almost all of his tweets, leaving his 400,000 followers with only music and restaurant recommendations. So I'll show you that in just a second. But essentially what he had to say was a quote down here, and that is, by the way, it was in Vietnamese, so you have to translate it. You know my position, no need to hear more from me. He put that out already. He made the statements previously. It's a bubble. Look at this stock, and he mentioned Tesla. Look at how, this has grown so ridiculously, and he made that, with a whole bunch of references to Weimar Germany and the way that things are going. There's so much money being pumped in from every angle. Inflation here is just going absolutely berserk, and the people who are unwilling to see it, well, that's on them. So he's made that very clear, and I just found it interesting. Here is his actual Twitter account, and as you can see there, the bio has just some bands, and I wanted to also note what was down here. This is the translation from Twitter. No more, you know where I am standing. Regardless, same thing depending on where you look at the translation, but ultimately this is, to me, very telling about where Micheal Burry is at today. We could look at his portfolio. We'll look at the 13 Fs as they come out. I'm going to give you updates on it, but I just wanted to make it very clear that at this point, he's saying, I made my warnings. I let you know this time because last time I was on the opposite end. I was trying to tell people, but I guess, he didn't have that popularity at the time, so it didn't have the attention on him. And so he said, I tried to warn, but nobody wanted to listen to me. So now this time I'm making it extremely clear. So we'll see what the future has in store. Investors haven't fully grasped inflation is dead ahead, economist Mark Zandi warns. Investors may want to hold on even tighter. Moody's Analytics' Mark Zandi believes Wall Street is significantly underestimating the seriousness of an inflation comeback, and he warns it will affect every corner of the market, from big tech to cyclical trades. Quote, inflationary pressures will develop very quickly. I don't think there's any shelter here. And this is something that I have talked about numerous times. Very quickly. It happens to be, if you look at it.
That's Micheal Burry. He talks about this dude Mark Zandi too. I'm gonna give you guys Steve Forbes real quick on what he thinks, because there's a couple of different warnings at play here. Right?
It seems like they're sounding a lot of alarms.
Right, because he said, you notice he said inflation is a big thing too. They're not just talking about the stock market bubble. We're gonna talk about inflation as well.
Investors, enjoy this bull market. Trouble is coming. Hello, I'm Steve Forbes, and this is What's Ahead, where you get the insights you need to help navigate these turbulent times. The stock market is still assuming that the damage the Biden administration and the Federal Reserve is beginning to inflict on the recovering economy will be limited. In coming months, that happy assumption will be exploded. Congressional Democrats have announced they plan to ram through enormous tax increases that will damage both the economy and the stock market, especially next year. Moreover, the Fed is on its way to firing up an inflation of a size not seen since the 1970s. Optimists point to consumers' record savings, which will be boosted even more with those $1,400 checks coming from Uncle Sam. All that cash will make for sizzling retail sales and travel outlays. The gigantic wave of government spending, which will be cascading right into 2022, will keep the economy's engines roaring ahead even if some taxes are increased. The bulls believe any rise in consumer prices will be short-lived. Worries about rising interest rates are overdone, they assure us. The Federal Reserve will make sure the price of money will stay low. With astonishing nonchalance, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell has dismissed any worries about future inflation, implying the Fed can control inflation like a light switch or faucet. But unhappy experience shows that inflation, once it gains momentum, is difficult to curb. Interest rates will rise. Our central bank is underestimating the amount of money printing it'll soon be engaging in. The Treasury Department will be issuing literally trillions of dollars in bonds to finance Washington's unprecedented peacetime spending. Who will buy the bonds? Not foreign governments like China or Japan, as was the case years ago. Not government agencies, especially Social Security. The days of big surpluses there are over. Not banks, which are already loaded with excess reserves and are looking for ways to boost loans to earn money. That leaves the Fed to do the heavy lifting, conjuring up money out of thin air on a scale never seen in peacetime, a surefire inflation formula. Compounding this mess are those upcoming tax increases on capital gains, businesses, higher incomes, gasoline, car mileage, energy, and inheritances. These taxes will be especially damaging to small enterprises. The Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders wealth confiscation scheme may also emerge. Larry Summers, Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton and Chief Economic Advisor to Barack Obama, is blasting Biden's policies here as the most reckless in more than 40 years. The U.S. economy has fundamental strengths coming out of the pandemic, but it won't be able to withstand the egregious financial and monetary abuses about to hit it. I'm Steve Forbes. Thanks for listening. Do send in your comments and suggestions. I look forward to being with you soon
Thanks
again.
for eating my béarnaise sauce.
Yeah, he had to put his own spin on it. You know what I mean? We all do. But what he's the facts of what he's pointing to, we can always point blame at whoever we want to and be like, oh, it's Biden's fault or it's Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders.
That money grabbing scheme.
What do you say? Wealth confiscation plan?
That's right. They got them grubby hands in my pockets.
You know what I mean? But what they're I'm gonna show a little video in a second about that explains a little bit about what he was talking about because he's throwing things out there like bonds and inflation rates and
I can't believe I didn't hear that Jerome Powell said that he could that the Fed could deal with inflation like a light switch.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
You mean like you're gonna flip it on? You're not gonna be able to turn it back off? Because that's the only way that I see that this is going down.
The way that I see this going down is they're gonna flip that light switch and it's gonna drop a nuclear bomb on China and we're gonna be embroiled in a World War III situation, which is a great way to get the economy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because he did say peacetime. In peacetime, like all this spending would be fine in times of not peace.
Yeah, when you pack the factories. Well, at this point, it'd be robots, but
and that's the big key to this whole thing is, and this next video kind of say it. So, but inflation only comes about when you're printing money and then nobody has anything to do with it. As long as you have you're spending all that money and it's staying in circulation and it's no big deal. It's just whenever that money starts to pile up and sit around that it becomes an issue. And so that's why you said in times of war when we're pumping out buying bullets out the ass and everybody's working and there's a lot of industrial output and stuff, then it doesn't become so much of an issue. And that's what people are saying. That's why we haven't seen it yet, is because whatever, I'll let the video explain it. But I thought that was crazy too, because to me, inflation is kind of it's like cancer in your body, right? There's a lot you can do to mitigate it from ever starting, but once it starts, it's not like you can just take a pill and then it turns off again. You know what I mean? It's not a switch. Once it starts going, and it can start picking up very, very quickly. And so this idea that they feel like
I just love it. He says, if what he said is true and it's an actual quote that they can handle it as a light switch, that's just funny because they've had it flipped on at about 2% for the last 30 years. I don't know if you guys have ever realized this,
have it just very
but
low.
50 years ago, everything you bought cost way less.
Yeah.
Now there was way less money in the economy, and those two things coincide with each other. They are correlated. They are very causational as well. Back in the day, if you have a great grandmother that's still alive, she'll be like, man, a gallon of milk used to be 50 cents. Now it's $3 fucking.
Don't even have to go far back. Gas is the perfect example for me. I remember when gas was 97 cents. I distinctly remember being able to get gas for less than $1. And I mean, shit, I was 17, 16, barely started driving. Yep. So just only in the last 15 to 20 years, I've watched it go from 97 cents to it being about
$3.30.
3 something, yeah, and that being normal, And I remember asking sometime when it started hitting 2. I remember when it was $1.97. And all of a sudden I turned around and I said, "Hey man,
what's up with this gas increase? Every time I turn around, what does, bro? Every time I turn around, this gas is more expensive."
Yeah, and that's inflation at work. And everybody said that it's cool, right? It's cool. It's natural, and it is to a certain extent. It is, like you said, we're growing as a society. There's more people out here, more money in circulation. There's gonna be a little bit of inflation. So inflation's gonna happen, and as long as it's happening at that slow and steady rate that matches this, but. It's weird that we're seeing over all types of different, it's population, right? Population went from this big to this big all of a sudden. Dude, our money supply went from this big to this big. They said 1 in every $5 was printed last year.
Yep.
Last year.
1 in every $5 to ever have existed since the Federal Reserve was enacted.
Since money has ever been a thing. And so we're seeing this a bubble of money. Humanity. Honestly, it's everything, the stock market, the money.
I said this a few episodes ago. I predict that the human population will reach a tipping point, a falling off point, and there will be a ginormous crash because you just won't have enough. You just won't be able to sustain that amount of growth forever. Like, you can't just keep growing your population forever.
And it makes sense that Congress would kind of know what the fuck's going on, because they won't let that minimum wage shit hit the floor of the Senate. Because if all of a sudden the minimum wage gets pumped up to $15, like, that's not going to matter in some place like California, but that's going to be a huge blow to a place like, the Carolinas, some of these, Alabama, Mississippi, New Orleans, places like that. All of a sudden your low-income jobs, which there's so many low-income jobs in those areas, especially the Southeast. Yeah. Now you see them. I mean, that's where the most people on food stamps are too. So, I mean, you have all of these problems focused there, where all of a sudden it's going to be like, hey, you got to pay everybody $15. Like, I couldn't imagine. Like, I'm not an economist. I'm very, ignorant when it comes to economic things. It's not something I really look into too much. But even I know, if you just all of a sudden are paying everybody double, like, that's gotta cause inflation. Like,
that's what I think that's what they want to use it as inflate. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's why they want to do it, because they're like, well, we make more money now. Like, there's more money out here. Everybody should make more money.
I've heard that. So that's one type of solution that you could say to, like, keep the inflation at bay, is like, if you paid people more money, then they'd have more money to spend, and they will, because, I mean, we're all just consumers out here. And so that might stem the tide of the inflation. The only problem with that I see is it's just that the people will be fired. They just won't have jobs at all. And then you'll actually have the opposite effect of it. But that's a whole other issue.
Well, I think that is inflation at work. You know what I mean? Because, like you said, when you just take a job that was $7 and you just double it, right? It's not really creating more value. It's still the same job,
Yeah.
And so the price of everything goes up. Like you talk about, when you take somebody, the grocery store, right? How are they going to fund that extra?
Yeah, because people have this idea
they have to raise the price of all the goods.
Yeah, people have this idea that if you force corporations to pay their employees more, they're just going to take that out of their bottom line. And that's not going to happen.
No, they're not.
Like, I don't know what world you live in where you think that the corporation's going to be like, yeah, you know what, that extra $7 an hour that we have to pay everybody, we're just going to take that out of our bottom line. That's not going to happen. They're going to pass those things. They're either going to fire those people and then cut everybody else's hours so that they're basically only paying them $7 an hour anyways, or they're just going to raise the prices of everything. Like, the bottom line will not come up at all. Like, I promise you that. Anybody who is imagining, like, there are companies who already pay their workers $20-something an hour in California and stuff like that. And they've worked out margins for their company to where they can still make a decent profit on that. But these giant corporations, who their whole idea is to make more and more money every year, like, it's not enough to just make the same amount of money. You have to make more money next year than you did the year before. It's not okay that you just made more. Like, we made $10 million last year in profits. Okay, well, next year you need to make $11 million. Like, it's not enough.
Inflation.
Yeah, so exactly, trying to outrun
That's really what it is.
So
that's why those projections say that shit. They're trying to outrun. It's like fucking.
Well, because everybody has a short-term view of the economy in the sense of, like, I'm gonna get mine while I'm here, and then
that's true.
Fuck future generations because I won't be there. So that's really what we're doing. When you print money, you're just stealing money from future generations because you're just making the money that they're going to have less valuable.
Because it's not just big businesses. This is what the government does. Like you said, it's like when it came time to solve the pandemic's problem, it's not like, let's just siphon a little bit off from this defense spending budget. No. Why would we do that? Then the defense spending guys are like, wait, what? My money? No.
You can't touch my money. It's to protect America.
Maybe we should roll back some of these farm subsidies, and then the farmers are like, we're already getting fucked in the ass. Can't roll back our fucking no way.
And same thing, like you said,
you got to make more money.
But the airline companies, Mac, we got to stop them from going under. Everyone has to fly everywhere.
Apparently. The funny thing is, people don't realize this about. I didn't realize this. Honestly, this conversation is making me understand that. It's like an economy, right? The government and these businesses are not the sauce. We're all paying each other. You see what I'm saying? Like, I pay your funds by purchasing goods and services that you make, and then you pay mine by buying shit that I make, right? So if I work at the grocery store, you come in, you buy groceries, and then the company uses that grocery money to pay my wages, and then I take my money and I go spend it somewhere else. So it's the idea, like you said, Target's not going to take the hit when the prices raise up. They're just going to raise the price of the goods. And so now you come in, you make $15 an hour. So you come and you spend more on your little eggs and things and that pays me my $15. But this idea that like the government, the businesses, they're never going to take the brunt of it. It always falls back down onto us, whether it's like more taxes or higher prices of goods. Or
this is what people fail to realize is that corporations, the government, they have no money of their own. Yeah. It's all our money. It's our money. So when they say like we need to get that money over there, oh, you mean our money? Yeah. The money that we gave you.
I'm gonna show up on the steps of the Capitol building and be like, "That's my fucking money, and I want that back now."
I'm John G. Allen, and I want my money now.
That's so funny.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
I want to give you guys this video right here. This one's a little more educational on exactly how the inflationary process works, not just warning that it's gonna happen.
Yeah, and does this define what inflation?
It's gonna talk about it. Yep. Okay. I don't know if I have that part in particular.
Well, just because I know that a lot of people hear the term inflation, they just don't really like. They're like, oh, things will cost more.
Yeah.
You know, but like they just understand like, well, things always end up costing more a little bit, but like, if it goes too far too fast, then things, you know, like...
Well, that's hyperinflation. So like
right,
we talked about earlier, inflation is normal. That happens. It's fine. But hyperinflation leads you to being Venezuela, where you're carrying...
That number is at $6.7 trillion, meaning that over 40% of all US dollars were printed in just the last 12 months.
Wow.
That's
well,
crazy.
we've had an incredible surge in government spending. A lot of it related, of course, to COVID-19 and to the ordered, economic shutdown and the fact that a lot of people were no longer out there earning money. And so the government looked to replace what people were no longer earning by printing money, which is what they did. You had all this government spending, but there were no additional tax hikes to cover the cost, nor did the government try to prioritize any of its spending. It didn't say, well, maybe we should spend less on the military so we have more to spend on fighting the pandemic, right? They didn't budget their resources. They just said, well, we're just going to spend more money on the pandemic, but we're not going to spend less on anything else, and we're not going to raise anybody's taxes to pay for it. So where'd all the government spending come from? It doesn't come from, thin air. The money has to come from somewhere. And if they're not going to make room in the budget by cutting spending, if they're not going to increase taxes to get additional revenue, well, then they just crank up the printing presses. So that's where all this new money came from. The government printed it and spent it into circulation through all these programs.
And from the looks of it, no one seems to be in a rush to slow things down.
A sweeping nearly $2 trillion relief package to tackle this pandemic, one of the largest in our nation's history.
In fact, no one is really talking about this at all.
And right now, nobody seems to think that this is a problem. People seem to think that we've stumbled on the equivalent of a monetary fountain of youth. People like to call it modern monetary theory, which is we can have whatever we want as long as government prints the money to pay for it, that there's no limit, that government is free as long as they print money.
Right? So that's not
strangely enough,
why do you think people
we haven't
want
seen
that
much
to
inflation
work?
for everyday goods like gas and food. Prices definitely haven't gone up anywhere near 40%. And other countries seem to be following suit.
Oh yeah, it's not just us. Everybody's doing this, by the way.
Singapore,
Everybody's watching.
Japan.
Because look, this is new. Remember we talked about this new. We just came off the gold standard 60, 70 years ago, something like that. So this is all, we're all new territory. When you talk about like history, like in the country's been running since 1776, right? And then now we just came off the gold 3,000 years later, right? So this is new. Or 300 years later, excuse me.
I was like, that's not the right math, but I'm going to just let her keep going.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean...
It's a good catch. It's a good catch.
Yeah, I didn't want to ding you. I just
do it. Drop it in the 300. So, but 300 years later, this is only 70 years, and since then we've just been like, that's the thing. It's like, well, if the Fed says it's cool, then it's cool. You know what I mean? And when we need some more, we just be like, hey, can I have some more, please? And they're like, yeah. And then so they did it for a little while.
We've got plenty.
They did it for a while, and now they're like, it seems to be working fine. We can all just
nothing seems to be happening.
Yeah,
hey, crank it up.
Yeah.
Get it going.
Give it a little more. Give it a little more.
A little bit more.
Yeah.
A little more.
Now juice it.
It's so funny too, like when you look into the research of like the Federal Reserve and stuff like that, like the whole idea of the Federal Reserve was to stop things like the Great Depression and just crashes in the economy from happening. It just happens to be that more crashes happened in the 70 years since the Federal Reserve than the entire 100 and something years before it.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if it's working well.
Yeah, it just depends on how you think about it, because this is the way I look at our economy is like it's propped up on stilts, and every time it looks like one of them's gonna fall, the Fed just comes with some money that they print, and they just kind of shove another stilt underneath it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, but they're building it higher and higher. And so the higher things get, the harder they fall. And so eventually it'll get to the point where the Fed is not able to figure out some sort of weird mathematical way to keep it propped up. And then when it crashes, it's going to crash like a goddamn elephant.
Spinning plates.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're
more
just
plates and add more plates. And it's like, how long can you do it? We're going to see.
Yeah, like as long as I can get out from being the guy holding the plates before they crash, then it's fine with me. And that's how everybody looks at the economy. It's like, as long as it doesn't crash on my head, I don't really care.
As long as we could blame another country when it crashes and then go fight them, we should be fine, right?
Well, you will be fine, actually. If you decide to go to war, then you will be. That's the number one way to get your economy out of a crisis, is to go to war with somebody else.
Unfortunately, I don't feel like we're those dudes anymore.
You
know what I mean? Like, I feel like we used to be able to be like, fuck with us, but there's
people
a lot of big boys out here.
They used to really fear the Raiders.
Yeah, there's a lot
of big boys. They used to fear the Pistons.
There's a little Tom Brady's running around nowadays.
The question remains, where's the inflation?
So where is the inflation?
The reason why we haven't seen inflation yet is because the amount of money being printed is only one of the factors that contributes to inflation. To get inflation, here's everything you need. Number 1, industrial output. How much stuff an economy makes. The more stuff, the more supply, which equals lower prices. The less stuff, the higher the prices. Number 2, employment. Too much employment leads employers fighting over workers, which leads to higher wages, which leads to higher prices. Too little employment leads to employees fighting over jobs, which leads to lower wages, which leads to lower prices. Number 3, the money supply. The main topic of this video and probably the easiest to understand. The more money in an economy equals higher prices, as long as the economy is producing the same amount of stuff or less stuff. And number 4, if the money is exchanging hands, and if so, how fast, also known as the velocity of money. If you print a bunch of money but that money is spent on food instead of gas, food is going to experience inflation, but gas isn't. If you want a more detailed explanation of this, I highly recommend you watch the video by Economics Explained on the subject. It will be linked below. And in our case right now, the money supply has shot up a ridiculous amount. But the other factors have been keeping inflation down. Industrial output, it's been down from businesses not being able to operate, which leads to less stuff. But there's also less demand from you and I to buy those things, so its impact on how much inflation we have is kinda neutral. Employment has also definitely taken a hit, and with less employment comes lower wages, which means lower prices, not inflation, and the velocity of money. It's pretty slow for everyone with all the uncertainty in the air. People don't want to spend money right now if they don't know if they're going to be able to keep their job or find a new one.
And I think the reason for that is a lot of the money that we print, as is always the case, ends up getting exported. If you look at our trade deficits, they surged to record territory, especially in goods, where we had all-time record high trade deficits. So a lot of that money got exported, and it wasn't here in the U.S. where it would have been used to bid up the price of goods and services.
But you know what they are going to spend money on? Things that only go up, like Tesla stock, every other stock, real estate, and Bitcoin. So we are seeing plenty of inflation happening right now. The S&P 500 has seen around a 70% increase since its crash in March, the same exact period all these new US dollars were printed. Home prices have gone up by 8% since January, which is higher than usual. And pretty much everyone and their mom knows how well Bitcoin has been doing. But instead of calling it inflation, we call it the stock market rally, the real estate boom, crypto's time to shine, or the great crypto bubble, depending on who you ask.
When inflation pushes up asset prices, people don't complain because the people that own those assets, of course, feel much richer.
Right now, the downward pressures are counteracting the upward pressures, and we are in a fragile equilibrium.
So inflation can work its way into the economy through various methods, and so prices can be affected in different ways. But ultimately, it's consumer prices that are where all the inflation ends up once it, finishes making its way through the economy, because that's really all everybody wants. I mean, people don't buy stocks because they want to own stocks. They buy stocks because they think they'll be able to buy more consumer goods with the profits from their stocks. But ultimately, those profits have to be realized, and then they have to be spent on consumer goods, and the price of those goods can go up.
Which begs the question, should the money printer keep going burr? Can it keep going burr?
I ultimately think we're going to see
not really a question, but I have kind of a thing. Is the economy like the weather? Because that's what it feels like to me. It feels like the weather. It feels like we can kind of predict it. We can analyze it. We can look at all the numbers and the statistics, but we don't quite actually know what it's going to do.
That's 100% true.
And with pumping all the money into the system, it's kind of like the Industrial Revolution affecting the climate. That's what it feels like. It feels like we're just pumping carbon into the air and being like, why is it getting hot in the summertime really bad?
On God. Exactly.
That's a really good analogy, John.
That's because my dummy brain doesn't really understand economics, but it just feels like those two
obviously
things.
Do.
Yeah, no, it's economics can be a very convoluted subject, but basically it boils down to a few things, and the most important being human psychology, like human beings. Like, there is no economy without people exchanging money for goods and services. That's what an economy is. So understanding economics just means understanding the things that are being bought and sold and by whom. Yeah. That's economics in a nutshell.
But like you said, that's the reason you can't predict it, because it is just human nature, right? Like,
you can't predict
you
what
can think all day long that Susie Sally's going to spend all her money.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden Susie Sally could just be like, I'm going to keep my money.
Yeah, all of a sudden she finds out, some Tony Robbins Money Master of the Game. She's like, actually, I'm getting into savings.
Yeah.
And then everybody's getting into savings. Then all of a sudden this trend of like getting back and backing away from consumerism is becoming a thing, and like minimalism is growing in popularity, and people are realizing, maybe what I need is more like emotional stability rather than like material stability and stuff like that. So as all of these things, like, these are all variables that are affecting the economy, which is why it sometimes seems hard to understand it, because it's like trying to understand and replicate a science experiment with 10 million variables. Like, it's very difficult to do that because you'll never be able to have control over all those different variables.
Yeah.
And I also think of it like everything else that we talk about on this show, right? Like, and this is where I get to, I was like, what really seems to me is like the government's just stumbled upon the law of attraction. They realize that it's all fake. You know, they fucking want to.
Yeah, just give them all the money they give.
Whatever,
We'll just keep it running.
Just make money. You just think about more money and money shows up. But no, honestly, that was a joke. But it's truly like that. Like, I ask you a definitive question right now. I say, is the climate changing? Right? Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables.
Depends on who you ask.
Depends on how long ago you go back and say, like, changing? Like, well, what do you mean by changing?
On God.
It seems like it's changed forever.
And that's why I love the analogy you made about the weather, right? It's like, you can predict it, sort of. You know what I mean? You can
we have a very solid belief that it will rain on Tuesday.
Right.
Yes.
But it might not.
It might not rain.
Now,
and every news channel got a guy that's like, it's probably going to rain.
Right,
now,
raining.
the problem with trying to treat the economy in that way is that being like, well, I think everybody's going to buy my thing on Tuesday, but then they don't buy your thing on Tuesday, that actually affects you.
Yeah.
That means that all of a sudden the things that you bought on credit because you were like, well, I'll have the money when everybody buys my thing on Tuesday, and then they don't buy your thing on Tuesday, but you've already spent all the credit, and then you're like, oh.
Yeah. You're standing out there in the broad-ass daylight, sun beating down on you with an umbrella and a poncho.
It's raining on your wedding.
Yeah, you're like, well, this didn't work out the way that I thought it was.
Standing outside in short shorts and a tank top, freezing to death.
This is why it's hard for me, because people always do this, though. Like, I'm quoting these experts and stuff, and it's not like these experts say, but you got to remember, these experts don't know shit. Like, nobody fucking knows. Like you said, where is the inflation? When is the crash? Nobody knows. This shit could run for another 10 years. The Fed been making it work for 70 years. They might be able to make it work another 170 years before all this shit comes tumbling down. We don't even know. It's just like all you can do is kind of look at what's happening, look what's happened in the past, and say, hey, this may or may not. Because what they're saying too is like this has happened to a lot of economies. This video goes on to explain that too. You know, like you got Zimbabwe, Venezuela. There's other countries too that I can't even think of. Those are the most. Germany. This happened.
Weimar, Germany.
Distinctly happened to Germany. Whereas what happened with Germany is during World War I, right? They lost, which sucks. So then you had all this debt, massive amounts of debt.
And they had a bunch of fees to pay to everybody else.
And they had to pay all this stuff back to everybody
with no money.
With no money because their economy had just collapsed from being in a war for fucking a decade or whatever it was.
Losing. Yeah.
And so
war only pays off if you win.
Yeah. So what did they say? They were like, okay, cool. Well, we'll just print more money, right? This is how we'll pay all these debts and stuff. We'll just print money, no big deal. And so they just start printing all this money until eventually it came back to hit them where, dude, they were walking around with $1 trillion notes. Like they had $1 trillion note, $1 trillion Deutschmark. You just like $1 bill was $1 trillion. And so if you've ever seen foreign money like that and it's like 1 million pesos or something, you're like, what? How is this a 1 million peso bill? That's inflation. That's what happens when a government is just pumping money into the system. Yeah. But we have hubris, I think. That's the problem I see. Is America is very...
Nobody thinks that the dollar can crash.
Right. That we're just
that you can't debase the American dollar.
Right. And I'm just
really...
Like, you can, though.
You can't?
You know what I mean? It can
Show
totally
me.
happen.
Show me.
It's definitely not going to rain on Tuesday.
I bet my whole life savings on the fact it's not going to rain on Tuesday.
Yeah. It's
a delicate game we're playing.
It's a delicate game. Yeah. It's a delicate game.
And like you said, one of mass consequences, it's not like, you know, with weather, you just get a little rain, you just get a little wet, and that sucks. You know, this is...
people's money. It's people's money.
Fucking with my money.
Fucking my money is like playing with my emotions.
And we'll see what happens. I think that's what it'll lead to. You know, I've been seeing this for a lot of people don't understand. Like we live, especially us as millennials, we've never lived through a major crisis. You know, we've never experienced a Great Depression or a World War or anything. I mean, at best, we had
we had like mini versions of that. We had like the war in Iraq and then we had the.
But that didn't affect you at all.
Price,
like all I saw y'all do was bitch on the, you know, man, it sucks what's happening on the news, and then you went back to playing your video games and shit. So it's like it's not like it was on our home country or anything like that. So
your dad didn't go out there and sweep streets.
You know what I mean? And I think that is coming though, like that level of I don't want to use the word suffering, but I mean it's shown throughout history that struggle comes. You know, there's times of great success. This happens in your own personal life. Sometimes you're winning, and sometimes you're not. You know what I mean? Sometimes you're down, and America hasn't been down in a long time. But to act like that's not ever going to happen to us, I think is silly.
Yeah. Well, because I don't even see it that much as like a long. I see generationally, no, it hasn't happened to us, but it's like 100, 120 years removed from the worst conflicts of all time and, you know, breadlines and all those things. So, like, I think you're right. Our generation and even the generation kind of before us hasn't really had to deal with that.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't. We just haven't had conflicts that take, you know, a draft even, you know, like since Vietnam, there hasn't been a draft. Yeah. So all these wars are voluntarily fought. So, I mean... we just haven't experienced that. But damn, it was not that long ago, people. It wasn't that long ago. Crack open watch a video. Go watch World War II in HD.
You can see it. And like they say, history repeats itself. The idea that shit's not coming back ever again, I think is silly. And like they said, right now it's fun. You know, we're buying the Bitcoin and stuff and the Tesla stocks and all this stuff, and it's fun. But just I would encourage you guys, the viewers and anybody else listening, to just do more research and understand how these systems and these cycles go about, because it can't go up forever. And, you know, having protection and protecting yourself against the downside is one of the major components of
insulation.
Let me tell you what my advice would be. It'd be get a gun, start a garden. The 2 G's of success. You need to get a gun. You need to start a garden.
And make sure your typewriter that you write your manifesto on.
Make sure it's well oiled.
Make sure it's well oiled.
Me and John were just talking the other day about how you're still voted most likely to get radicalized.
When it comes to this kind of stuff, I think that I've already become economically radicalized. Like I'm not gonna go out and like storm any Capitol buildings. I don't find myself becoming politically radicalized just because I don't have any faith in I don't have any faith in either side of politics. So I'm like, yeah, you guys aren't selling me on any of this. But get a gun and start a guard. That's all I got to say.
But I get what you're getting at, though, because that is the best protection against this type of stuff is not there's a lot of times there's no asset. There is assets that you can hide your money in that'll protect you and stuff like that. But the biggest thing you could do is have a skill or something that is universally needed. Always like let me tell you something. I don't care how bad the stock market crashes or how bad the US dollar inflates. The internet's not going anywhere.
On top of that too, anywhere. It not just having like the skills, not just that, but also the commodities that people might want. Like, it's a bull market for bullets.
Yeah,
like
facts.
If some shit happens and all of a sudden people are carrying around $1 trillion notes like it's Weimar Germany, you're gonna want some 9mm bullets.
Yeah, that's why your boy's starting his own water. Come on,
there's actually a huge shortage of bullets right now.
The planet,
it's like Bitcoin, baby. Just mine it. Go mine them.
But
bullets.
that's interesting. But see how you look ahead. You know what I mean? You don't try and look into like the hot thing right now. You look to like, when the next thing comes around, what is everybody going to need? Mm-hmm. Because then that thing blows, the Bitcoin or the whatever, Tesla stock market blows up, but then there come everybody rushing to buy cheap housing or some shit or whatever, that they might need in another type of market. And I think that's where real good investing is being able to see what happens next.
Yeah, I'd say that your most insulated skill would be knowing how to grow food.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Because everybody going to need that food.
Because, if
including you.
If it all shuts down, you know what I mean? You being able to do it yourself.
And, man, I'll tell you what. I was never more afraid, literally afraid, than when I found out that in a major metropolitan area you have about 5 days without getting resupplied before the grocery stores are completely empty.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah.
How long does it take to grow a cucumber?
A lot longer than 5 fucking days. A lot longer than 5 fucking days.
You gotta start now. You can't start.
Yeah, you can't start when the grocery store's empty. You gotta have them seeds planted, baby.
Well, you were talking about consequences from printing all this money, and COVID-19 is kind of what made us print all this money in the last year.
Yeah.
Like the reason why 40% of our money got printed in the last year is because nobody was working.
Yeah.
And we had to fucking pay people not to lose their houses.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was really wanting to start off with was how many people are on unemployment right now, and how many are receiving unemployment benefits. And it's a strange number because it's 10.1 million people unemployed, which is what's the percentage there? 6.3% unemployed right now of the workforce.
So low.
Yeah, 6.3%, right? But there's 18.7 million people receiving unemployment insurance benefits.
Say words, son.
Which means that those people are, this extra number of people, I guess, are partially employed.
That's more than double.
Say words, son.
So it's a strange graph there. More than 18 million people.
That shit shot up.
Oh, it did. It surely did. If you scroll down, you can see the dates there. It's from January 2020 to January 2021.
Pandemic.
Look at this. But look at the rates though. The pandemic hit, and almost vertical line in unemployment shoots up, right? Officially unemployed, do not have jobs. That just happened within a matter of days, basically.
Correct.
But you can see that the other one was a little bit slightly more of a
little bit.
Yeah, it was like, wait, everybody was like, is that easy to get unemployment? Yeah.
That's the Bitcoin bubble right there. Everybody was like, wait. How much does the Bitcoin cost? How much was it worth? Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
Oh man,
get in. Hey, yo, grandma told me to buy a fishing boat on Bitcoin.
That's so crazy. But it's interesting. I bet you that number is also too because you have things like PPP and stuff where the businesses have unemployment too, so they're getting money without
to pay workers that aren't working.
Yeah, but that still doesn't add up because then you should still technically be getting paid from your job. So there's a lot of fraud going on in this bitch.
That's what that graph says to me. It says there's a lot of fraud going on.
Fraud
Uncle
happening.
Sam's paying a lot of money to people. I mean, shit. In California, I've multiple stories. I've seen multiple stories. One that really stands out to me the most is a gentleman in his 30s. made a rap music video. In one of the lyrics, he talked about scamming the unemployment disability service in California, and they came and arrested him. Turns out he had frauded them for over $1 million.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah,
and like literally, there's single addresses that have over 10,000 unemployment claims filed for them. And so people
That's a
like
full-time job.
No. You see, you're misunderstanding what's happening. That's not one person filing 10,000 claims. That's 10,000 different people just randomly choosing an address and name and filing under it. Absolutely.
And getting money from that.
Yeah, well, because they don't have enough time to look into them. Like there's like, especially when everybody's
I think it's one dude.
Huh?
I think it's one dude.
I mean, I'm sure that there's multiple counts of it happening, but the idea of, because that's something that would raise a red flag, is if you had a lot of like if you had the same person applying over and over again at the same address, but if you have different people applying at different addresses or at the same address, it gets harder to find, I guess.
It's easy to make up people, though. I'm
not saying it's hard to make up people.
It's easy to make up people.
Yeah, and what concerns me too is like, I always heard from my friends on the right that illegal immigrants got food stamps.
Yeah.
I used to hear that all the time, and I used to just firmly shake my head, say, "Of course not.
Yeah.
How dare you suggest that the United States government is paying illegal immigrants money for food?" But turns out when you actually look into this, there's 42 million people on food stamps per 2017's data. We don't have the data from COVID, so we don't know about that. But based on 2017's data, 42 million people on food stamps. Around 4 million, around 10% of that, are citizen children with non-citizen parents, dreamers, as we used to call them. So 4 million dreamers get food stamps for their households, meaning that in those 4 million children each have a set of parents, probably, to a certain percent. Like you'd have to extrapolate the percentages, but maybe like 1.6%. 1.6 members of the household are parents or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, but based off of this, if you see what I'm saying though, it's like it averages. So
I'd say it's less than 1.6, honestly.
So let's say we double it and then add half of that double.
Yeah.
So you're talking what, about 10 million parents of the 4 million children that are receiving EBT benefits in America? That's a big percentage.
There's a lot of legal,
that's a big percentage.
Immigrants that are on social services of all types. For sure.
So now we're talking about not even just American citizens. We're talking about non-citizens. So who knows, man? That number of how many people are undocumented in America is between 10 and 12 million. We don't even know.
Yeah.
We don't even know. That number could be as high as 20 million or even more than that.
It doesn't actually seem like a lot.
It doesn't, but that's about, us, like if you look at the percentage of the
population. That's according to the people who predict your weather.
Yeah, exactly.
True. So like really 10 to 12 million, and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound like a lot, but having lived in both California and Texas, border states, there's a lot of illegal immigration going on. So I'd say that I'd be willing to double those numbers, honestly. Exactly. Which is still not that much. I mean,
if 1% of all Americans are on food stamps, how do you think it is during COVID 3 years later with the rise in the population, the rise in immigration, the rise in all of these other things that we've seen, inflation, all that keeps going up. So now we're probably at 2% of Americans are on food stamps.
Yeah.
We are a first world nation.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that to me is like, I mean, we're sitting at 6.3% unemployment. That seems, obviously COVID-19. Well, it seems low, but in the 2008 financial crisis where the stock market crashed, we only hit 10%.
Yeah.
And I mean, even in the heights of the Great Depression,
25%.
I think 25% was the highest it had ever gotten on unemployment. And I mean, it's like,
I guess that's why I felt like it was kind of low, for a pandemic that supposedly shut down the entire economy.
In the Great Depression, they didn't have the internet.
Yeah, well, and also with the Great Depression, like so many banks went out of business, so many people lost their houses, it was such a catastrophic thing that like even when we look at the 2008 financial crisis, it like pales in comparison.
Yeah, it's not even close.
And then that hit we took last March also just pales in comparison.
I will note that where the Great Depression came off of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stock market crash. I'm just saying.
Correct. That's why I'm talking about it now, because what you're describing, economic collapse due to hyperinflation, because of us printing 40% of our money in the last year. that directly correlates with food stamps, unemployment benefits, unemployment percentage, all of these things. Because when the stock market crashes and our money inflates, people are going to lose their jobs.
Yep.
And unless the government's there with the boo-boo Band-Aid to start handing out checks.
Which sucks because they're printing money to do that. The Band-Aid that they're using is printed money. So money. You can see how that could create a really nasty cycle.
Negative feedback
loop.
Yeah,
facts.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well,
and the problem, and really what happened in the Great Depression, to get a little bit more nuance with it, was that the stock market crashed. But the stock market crashed in relation to the, people were making runs on the banks. And so they wanted to have their liquid assets. They wanted to have cash, because cash is king. When there's an economic problem,
when it's inflated.
Not when it's inflated. But when there's an economic problem, you want to have tangible access to your money. You want to see it. You want to know that it's there. So when people were going to the banks, a lot of people don't understand that the banks don't just hold on to your money. They lend it out to people and they make loans and stuff. They're only required to have 10% of all of their ledgered amounts in reserve. So when everybody that banks with a bank goes to the bank and says, I want my money back, they can only give it to 10% of those people. And so what happens is the banks go bankrupt, and then literally people's cash just evaporates into thin air. Like, their money just evaporates. And I'm afraid, with this digital age, that's what's going to happen too. You have these ones and zeros on your bank account, on your little app and on your computer and shit, and then eventually one day you're just gonna open that up and that's just gonna say 0 0 0 0 0 0.
Well, no, it won't. It'll still say that number on there, but then you're gonna go to the ATM and you're gonna try and pull it out, but the ATM's empty. And then you're gonna go to the next ATM and that ATM's empty. And then you're gonna go to the bank and you say, hey, I want to withdraw some funds, and they're gonna be like, you don't have any funds, where we don't have any funds to give you.
Or that bank will be out of business.
But so luckily, that'll be interesting, and maybe that's playing into why we're able to do this, because the bank will be out of business. Facts, yeah. Because you can still use your debit card
until you can't.
Or you can still just go and swipe that card, and your imaginary money, you'll pay them in the imaginary money, and it's very interesting.
Yeah. It is incredibly interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's why people like gold. People really fuck with gold because it's it's something that you can't fake.
Yeah,
I mean, you can, but it's a lot harder to fake some gold than it is to fake some computer numbers. And so it's when
if anything, like you said, this could be the other side of the Bitcoin conversation. All these things could lead to the great Bitcoin revolution, because that's where I've always seen Bitcoin as it could become a world currency. You see what I'm saying? It could be a united standard, because everybody's got the internet, everybody's got access to the blockchain. Well, but my point is, you don't know anything about the Federal Reserve,
right?
But some guy in Ethiopia can look up your Bitcoin. You know what I'm saying? So it's anybody, it bridges the gap between all of us, and it has the same value in those countries as it does here. There's no exchange rate. It's Bitcoin.
I wonder if they're gonna start handing out thumb drives with Bitcoin on it as unemployment benefits. Come get your 0.02% Bitcoin.
0.0002 Bitcoin. Yeah.
One quick point. That's some real Book of Revelation shit. World currency. So I love it.
That's
something that scares a lot of evangelical Christians.
Oh, they're gonna get it.
But when you're talking about this potential stock market crash and stuff like that, I'm pointing out food stamps and homelessness and this other stuff, which is going to link us up with what you're going to talk about. But look at what happened in the Great Depression. It wasn't just the people, it was also the businesses. Yeah. It was it says 300,000 companies went out of business. It was mass migrations of people because, there was a drought at the same time. So you had the Dust Bowl. You had just hundreds of thousands of people moving into the cities as well. So, what other potential repercussions could there be with our bubble bursting today in America? If America right now really gets hyperinflated and gets hit with a Great Depression, astronomical, because we have so many more people now. We have so many more people that are just relying on the system, that are within the system. If this system fails, man,
something that I've been learning a lot about recently as I start my garden and getting into how food is produced and stuff like that. Over 60% of our calories come from things like grains and processed flours and stuff like that. And all of those crops, corn, soy, wheat, all of those crops are subsidized by the government to the point where without those subsidies, all of the farmers that grow that stuff would be operating at a loss. And so if the government no longer has the ability to subsidize these farmers, the people who make 60% of the calories that we eat are not going to be doing that anymore.
Or they're going to be selling it for an exorbitant amount of money. You know what I mean?
Well, it'll be so much that nobody will be able to pay for it.
Yeah,
and they won't be able to cover the cost because everything that they need to actually grow it is going to also be more expensive.
Yeah.
So like literally there won't be anything growing.
If our government steps in those type of situations and we get another Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal, like, could that be a solution? I mean, because like literally where
are they going to get the money?
That's
you know what I mean?
The New Deal was just him giving out money to people, so and that seems to be what the problem is.
It was also creating, it says, you know, they created 40 new agencies and around 100 new government offices and 15 major laws. So he came in with a staple gun and trying to put this thing back together as best he could.
Yeah, I mean, like, you could make... The problem is that there's a lot of downstream, like, you look at the things like the Hoover Dam and stuff like that. Like, you make these federal projects to just employ people in doing something so that you have an excuse to give them money. We've kind of gotten past the point where we need an excuse to just give people money. We're kind of cool with just giving them money now without them doing anything. So I don't think that you'll have these federal projects happening. And even if you did, like, as I get more into, like, hunting and conservation and stuff like that, like, dams have downstream, like, no pun intended, but like they have downstream consequences on like the mobility of like animal migrations and stuff like that. Like there are problems that arise from other things like doing that.
The solution's not going to be just build a fuck ton of dams. So.
Well, that's what it was in the New Deal.
That's what I'm saying. But
that was in 1933 though. So we're talking about like, you know, like
all I'm saying is that I think we're way past the point where we're like, people need to like do something to like we're totally cool just giving out money to people now. And so like if that's the case, then if giving out money is creating the problem, then I don't see how a new round of giving out money is going to fix the problem of giving out money.
This is where I see it though, because if you go back to what that dude was talking about with where the money comes from, right? It's the same thing I think about, like with me, and I made this joke the other day in the kitchen, remember? I'm like, all right, I'm going about my business. I spend X amount of dollars on podcast equipment and stuff. I spend X amount of dollars on food and groceries and things. And I have a budget like everybody else, you know. I spend this much on porn or whatever you're buying. You know, I get my porn for free. It's just, but
yeah, you're Jimmy John's.
Yeah, but you're spending your money. Now all of a sudden I got to go to the dentist. You know what I mean? And I get a $3,000 dentist bill. Something happens, you know, my tooth gets knocked out. Life happens. You never know. I unfortunately don't have the ability to just run to the bank and print out an extra $3,000 to pay for my fucking new tooth, right?
You don't have a counterfeit machine?
That. Yeah, you don't get that thing where you just be like, make me a couple Bitcoin real quick. You don't have that. So what do you have to do in order to cover these types of expenses, right? You have to move money around. You have to shut your porn budget down for a couple of days. You need to come off the fancy coffee.
Might have to get a loan.
You know, that's one way, but I wouldn't encourage it.
I also wouldn't encourage you spending money on your porn.
You know what I mean? But like that's what I'm saying is you have to negotiate your budget. But for some reason, America we're just against it. You know what I mean? Like we're spending like. We'd rather leverage our $850 billion war budget and just go to war with the country to stimulate our shit than to just say, hey, why don't we just kick some of this money back and work on these social programs, these things like that we're talking about with, you know, food stamps and all this stuff, or pandemic relief, or the need for whatever the fuck. You know, we have needs as a society and they can be solved, but I don't understand why we continuously go to the just make more money rather than rebalance the budget.
Well, you see, the problem is that the people who are in charge of whether or not we balance the budget or make more money is like in that video, there's another thing that you can do to get the government the money it needs to do the things it wants to do, which is tax the people. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's not a very good strategy to get reelected when you come out and say like, hey, we have to raise them taxes on y'all. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes the idea of raising taxes on them.
I don't think it solves the problem, though. Like you said, that just leads to more people out here that have less money. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, because
and then taxes, they turn around and get
taxes are a way, you know, for lack of a better term, it's wealth redistribution. If we take some money from these people and we siphon it through the government and we put it in these programs, which are designed to help other people, you know? And so, like, the idea of taxes helping yourself, like, whatever it is that the taxes were going to help me with, like if it was really that the taxes were going to help me, then I could just pay for it myself. But that's the point, is that the taxes go from people who have the money to people who, quote unquote, don't have the money, for example. But that's
those 8 million people with jobs and on unemployment. That's where
that's where your tax money goes. You know, your tax money goes to. I seen somebody, one of the people I follow posted this thing where I guess in like, can't remember if it was in Georgia or Texas, in some state they just passed this new bill where if you're charged with a sex crime, trafficking, distribution, or production of child pornography and stuff like that, then you get it's a mandatory life sentence in prison. And I was like, on one hand, I was like, yeah, we really don't want those sex traffickers out there. But at the same time, now you've just made it to where all the people of that state are paying for this sex trafficker's existence. Although it's not an awesome existence, you know, it's not like you're having a lot of fun in prison.
Jail is expensive.
But jail is expensive.
Well, because jail
spend a lot
gets
of money.
Their cut. Jail's the house. The house always fucking wins.
And even in public prisons, like it's not even just private prisons, but even in public prisons, as a matter of fact, and public prisons actually have, on average, higher cost per prisoner than private prisons, which is kind of funny considering the private prisons are still making a profit. But that's the whole idea, is that somebody's getting a cut of that money when it comes through, like, and that's what taxes do. Like, you think like, oh, okay, well, we have this idea of like, we're going to lock up sex traffickers forever, for life. But you have to, like, they have human rights. So, like, you have to feed them, and you have to clothe them and shelter them and stuff like that. So how are you going to pay for that?
You're putting them on EBT for the rest of their life.
Exactly. And so now all of a sudden you're like, you have a group of people who are like, we don't want illegal immigrants, for example, to have EBT, but we're cool with putting
rapists,
like
murderers,
sex traffickers and murderers.
Yeah.
Those guys, I'm definitely willing to give my tax money to. And it's like strange how we have that system set up, and it's like there's no good solution in that particular instance. Like, I don't know what you do with sex traffickers to make it to where they're not sex trafficking, but also so that taxpayers don't have to pay for their fucking lives.
I was really interested in this map. It shows the states with the most people on food stamps.
And the blue is less and the red is more. Okay,
correct. Now, how else do you think
Nevada has a lot of fucking people on food stamps?
That also correlates with like maps that show racial diversity in America. It also correlates with a whole bunch of other maps. If you want to talk about violent crime, things like that, like it correlates in these areas because of the poverty. So, you know, well, not necessarily only because of the poverty, but poverty is kind of the linchpin that kind of holds these maps together in my head, because I've seen these maps a lot. And it's sad. It's sad that, like, there is no solution that we can think of. We can't just keep printing money. The stock market, we are hyperinflated. Like, these things are going to happen, and it's going to affect the poorest people the most. It looks like.
Yeah, always
always
falls down. Because that's my thing. That's why Ray Dalio and all of them are on the thing, just like, hey, we're telling y'all because we gonna be good. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm chilling regardless. You know, like, I'll see a $3 billion reduction in my assets, but I'm here for the long haul anyways. You know what I mean? So they're chilling. But you know, the average American has less than $1,000 in savings.
I think it depends on how bad the crash is. Because in my head, like, that's why I said, like, get a gun and start a garden. Because in my head, the end scenario is not hyperinflation and, you know, it's like hard times for people and it's hard to pay for things. It's like there's no things to pay for.
It's Mad Max.
Yeah, like there's like that's my idea is like there's not going to be anything to pay for. Like, literally nobody will be producing anything and you will have to grow your own food and you will have to get your own protein and shit like that.
You
like,
better learn how to trap rabbits.
That's what I'm thinking. It's like, even in that scenario, like you say, like Ray Dalio and them are going to be good, and I'm like, but will they though? I don't know.
Like you said, it's not like they can't afford security. Like, they're gonna raise their own private
security.
They're gonna raise their own private army, and there's gonna be plenty of people out there looking for a job, so they'll do it for.
I will join Ray Dalio's private army. Let me put that shit on the record right now.
My job.
What exactly do you plan on getting paid with if the money that Ray Dalio is going to pay you is worthless?
Ray Dalio's still gonna have money, and look.
But his money is worthless.
No. It doesn't go down like that. Inflation, like, look, people in Venezuela still have money, right? It's not that you don't have money. It's just that your money, you need more of it to buy the same goods.
I'm
right?
talking about, that's what I'm saying, though. It's like, I envision it being worse, like the next step past Venezuela. Like we're comparing, like, oh, it's gonna be like Venezuela.
I mean, even still, if you look at Weimar Germany, which was the worst example of hyperinflation like ever recorded, right? They still had money. You know what I mean? Like there's pictures of people. Like let me pull up some pictures of Germany. Oh, matter of fact, I'll scroll through that video because they talk about it. But you'll still have money and it'll still exist. It's just like Ray Dalio will be paying you $10 million to be his soldier, you know what I mean? And then you'll still be able to go buy $1 million bread.
But my problem, but that's what I'm saying though, is that if the people who have to grow the bread need $10 million to grow it, but they aren't getting paid by the people who are like Ray Dalio or whatever, $10 million for your security guards and stuff, like at some point, because farmers aren't rich people. So at some point, the people who produce the things that you need to pay for with the hyperinflated money will not be producing those things.
So I disagree. And because that's what I was telling you. That's the solution. That's how farmers will be okay. Because I don't care what the price of goods is, you need food. And like you were just proponent of growing food is a skill. That's not something that... you know what I mean? Like the subsidies and all that stuff is what they do to keep a profit, but there won't be need for that because everybody's going to have a small amount of money. So they're not going to be able to they're not going to be able to pay for your show, your podcast. That shit's dead. All these YouTubers, that shit dead. Okay. Like things that are of entertainment value. You're a clown out here. That shit's dead. Okay. Food. You're good, dog. You're good. Because no matter how you slice the pie, I don't care if it's $10 million a piece of bread or $1 a piece of bread. You need bread. And so the guy who makes bread, he's going to be good. He'll still be producing bread. He'll still have the skill, the seeds, you know what I mean? Like his plants produce the same seeds that he needs to produce more, so he's fine. The problem is really in everybody else. Like I said, you have a job coding or some shit like that, you know what I mean? You're going to get laid off and then you're going to be looking for a job. Well, the only people employing in a Mad Max type situation is Ray Dalio, who also still has money because really now his $5 billion has become $50 billion, right? It's not worth as much. You see what I'm saying? So you still have money and there'll still be an exchanging of goods and stuff. And that's why the best thing you could do is start a business for yourself or something where your assets are still valuable even in a market crash. Yeah. There's still people making money in the Great Depression.
Oh my God, dog, look.
This is like a man standing next to his paycheck.
Oh my God.
Here's a lady going to get money to buy bread.
It's a great day at work. Could you load my wheelbarrow up with $27,000,
Here's
please?
kids just playing with bricks of money because they can't afford toys. But they got hella money. Like, this is one German soldier's wages. So here you go. There's Ray Dalio pays you that much money. So, I mean, because that's the problem. I'd
rather just have a garden.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
This is their scale, I guess, of hyper. Dude, it's crazy because when hyperinflation hits, like, the bread could be $10 in the morning. By the afternoon, the bread could be $25. Yeah, like the shit just it's all over the place, and it's crazy. And the price of things will double in a day, in hours. It's insane. And so, I mean, you'll still be having an exchange, but it just becomes almost impossible to manage because that's what money is. Money is a token of value. It's supposed to be something that we use to represent a certain value, and it can really.
I think really what I'm getting at is that when the economy gets to that point, the things that we value will be only money, or like it'll be like food. Like you'll only value food. You'll only value the bullets. Like you'll only value the things that, because at that point, like you're, like. Even if Ray Dalio is going to pay you $10 million a week to be in his security force, and then you're going to go and buy food from the farmer for with that money, and it's like, it's not like you're going to be buying anything else. It's not like you're going to be buying, nobody's like you think that they're going to be like still pumping oil out of the fields and stuff? Like they'll be making like gasoline or that like you can go buy like, huh?
If you can afford it.
I guess so, but I'm just like, I'm thinking, I don't know how far it will go, but I'd rather just be the guy growing the food than being the dude who's like working for wheelbarrows worth of money.
Yeah, I mean, I feel you, but I feel you, but if for all those other people who don't have the skill of making their own food, they're still gonna need to eat and stuff.
You better be stockpiling like.
That's why I told them to get a gun and start a gun.
Yeah, no, you better have 7,000 cans of corn in your basement.
Yeah, or prep, for sure. But no, I mean, I think like my point that we were saying though is that it's the poor people right now, the people who are already in poverty that are gonna get hit hard. You know?
Oh yeah, of course.
And really not even just the poor people, because even people who don't think they're poor are really poor on the grand scale of things. So you're middle class and you're like, oh, I'm good. I got money in Bitcoin. Like
wait till your 401k drops out.
Yeah, exactly. Just disappears.
I think it's so funny when people talk about I think what is the statistic? Like 80% of Americans don't have like X amount of dollars in savings.
That's what I said, less than $1,000.
And it's like, that includes people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Like that's not
your neighbor or whoever you make $200,000 a year. You're living paycheck to paycheck.
You're poor, bitch.
Yeah, you're living paycheck to paycheck.
Some of these people
and it's
really
fun.
Do be poor.
That's the thing about it, right? It's the same. It's the same on a macro scale as on a micro scale. You as an individual live the same way that our economy as a whole does. We get the money and then we spend it, and it's all fine. It's this balancing act that you play until something goes wrong, until the money that's supposed to come in don't come in anymore all of a sudden.
It's when you get back to America and you're like, where's all the money I made?
Yeah, where's my money? Just come with my money.
Where's the money, Joe Biden?
Yeah. So it's gonna be tricky, but dude, I get exactly what you're pointing out with this too, because right now we have the social programs and they're good. I mean, I wouldn't say like. I think, well, maybe they're not.
They're chugging along.
They're chugging along. Like, this is the argument for them always.
It's a saggy net, but it's a net.
Yeah.
There's 8 million people who are just taking advantage of the system, but there's still 10 million people who might be living off that system.
Like, they need it.
You know what I mean? Like, so you gotta.
Not to
he
mention
rapes, but he's saved.
He starves the children, but he starves the children to save the children.
It's true. It's true.
So it sucks, but. I definitely wish that the system was more efficient. You know what I mean? That's the thing. And I think lending a little bit to what you're going to talk about too, I wish there wasn't the guy just reaching in, getting his little cut every time.
Well, here's what I was thinking about too. Before we move into that, I just wanted to make this point about the 10 million illegal immigrants that are getting food stamp benefits. If we had a system in place where it was easy for those people to become legal citizens and get jobs that pay taxes, if we had some sort of amnesty or some sort of quick expedited process, you come in, you sing the Amazing Grace, you point out the president on a lineup of 6 people, and you become a citizen. I think that would be amazing. I think that would turn our entire country around, because those people still live here, they still work here, they still do all these things within our system. We just don't get the tax money off of their wages.
We just don't get to steal their money.
I'll agree.
I mean, yes.
I'd rather everybody become illegal immigrants and nobody gets taxed. That's what I would prefer.
Yes. I would agree with you until what happens when you hyperinflate the job market, though. Like, what happens when now it's easier for them to come and easier for them to become legalized citizens? This is just a counterpoint to that argument.
Yeah.
So that 20 million illegal immigrants becomes 60 million legal immigrants, and then that becomes 120
now they're all looking
million,
for jobs,
and they're looking for jobs too, right?
And they can get any job, not just the job that you have to pay them under the table. They can get the fucking coding job.
So here's what we do. Here's what we do. We dome it, seal the borders. We have a finite amount of workers. Everyone gets amnesty.
Sorry, guys. Until 20,000 people die, I can't let you in.
Yep.
They tried that. They was like.
Yeah, they didn't like that wall.
Nobody likes isolationism, huh? God damn it.
But dude, it's nasty though, because
have you guys seen the videos of the people on the border?
Yes, that's what I was going to talk about.
Have you seen those videos? Literally, they're bringing hundreds of thousands of people across, 20 people at a time. I watched this video. There was a line into the horizon of people across the Rio Grande River, and this dude had a kayak, like a raft, and he was just rowing from one side. He'd get like 10, 15 people, row them to the other side, and then he'd go back. And like literally all day, like this was just happening all day, and this dude was just filming it on his phone, and I was like, That's a lot of people.
What's worse is the intersection of all the problems we were just talking about, because they're rounding those people up at the border. You still got kids. They still got like thousands of kids just sitting at the border.
Yeah.
And dude,
they're not in cages anymore. They've replaced them with plexiglass rooms.
Ooh, I saw a nice big pile of those space blankets. It looked like the inside of a gerbil's nest.
Blankets, dog.
I was like, and I'm not.
So
I don't mean to laugh at suffering. I'm just saying, like, it's a fucking problem. You have to laugh at the absurdity of it.
Looking.
Like, we're in America.
They're like in a NASA like base. It's very interesting. And
they're keeping them under this bridge. There's this one place. There's video. I gotta find it right now. There's videos of them where they're just hoarding.
Under a bridge?
They're just hoarding people under a bridge.
Jesus Christ!
Like they just don't have nowhere else to put them, or they do have places to put them, but
it's
supposedly they say that this is just a temporary holding facility while they get them to these places, these holding facilities and stuff that they have, but. I can't find the video I saw this morning when I was running on the treadmill, but
this is why Jen Psaki was saying, "Don't come now." Did you guys see that video?
No.
Jen Psaki, she's the spokesperson for the president or for the White House or whatever, basically the president, and she was basically saying, don't come now. Like we'll get some shit set up for you guys. You come later, but just don't come now. Like, but it was so strange because I didn't know what she meant by that. I was like, you mean by that? Like, are you going to change like the immigration thing? Like, are we going to make it easier to immigrate into the United States? Because that would be awesome. But then you see things like this and you're like, is this what she was talking about? Like, you literally just don't have any room for them because like they're so against sending them back to their own country to like follow the process because the process takes so long and it's so expensive. So they're like, well, we can't do that because that's immoral. But we have nowhere to put them. So you end up doing these like other what could be seen as like a moral act, which is like housing them under a bridge.
Yeah.
And it's like, don't you think that maybe it seems that the linchpin of these problems is that the system takes too long and that it's too expensive.
That's what it seems.
That's what it seems like. It seems like if the system, like if you can't, like if you're not comfortable with just being like, nope, you got to go back. Nope, you got to go back. Like if you're not comfortable with not letting anybody in, and you're not comfortable with housing them in lesser conditions, then you got to make it easier for them to come in. Those are the only solutions. I don't understand what, like, now me personally,
or get them to your prison faster.
Yeah.
Which
charge them with a crime.
Yeah, well,
so you can get them in your prison.
No, they have the immigration prison, and that was the big thing. Is like I said, they're keeping them under the bridge. But kind of find out they were talking about they could only get 5,000 people into one of these facilities, and I was like, what? 5,000? Like you said, they're coming by the hundreds of thousands, and y'all got facilities that only hold 5,000.
So this is no crisis at the border, right?
This is, and look at this.
Right.
And this is just folks coming across the border, unaccompanied.
They're housing them under a bridge.
Yes, and we're down here near midnight on Thursday evening, and I've not been here before. Have you been here?
I was here 2 years ago, and it bears no resemblance. We were controlling the border. Now we're hearing that Border Patrol is spending more time helping these families while criminals are bringing drugs and illicit materials into the United States. They don't have the resources to stop the illegal flow because the administration is allowing this flow that we see behind us. It's inhumane.
When they had the stay in Mexico policy, it was at 45-year record lows where you did not have this.
We've heard it from so many people, Border Patrol agents, say there's nothing like this in years. And we have people being housed underneath a bridge. And while they're doing this, criminals are coming across the river, poisoning our families and killing 80,000 people.
He's gonna really hammer that. Hey, by the way, some of these people got drugs in their pants. It's like,
we got these goddamn cops watching these children. We need to get them on the beat.
There's the plexiglass rooms you were talking about?
Yeah. There's not a lot of social distancing going on in there.
Hey, there's nowhere to social distance.
Bro, that's what I was talking about. Look at that.
Dude.
Looks like a Snapchat filter.
They're kids.
What the hell?
These are kids.
That's crazy.
We're literally treating them like fucking guinea pigs.
Dude, but if you want to talk about food stamps, right? Like, they, the article I was hearing them talk about, they flying these kids from Texas to like a holding facility in San Diego where they can store them only like a couple thousand at a time or whatever, but where they keep them there because, like, obviously they can't keep them under a bridge forever,
Yeah.
But I'm just like,
expensive.
Who's paying for it? Yeah, expensive for all these flights and shit.
Not only is how expensive is it, they're losing some of these fucking kids. Now you're just going to fly undocumented, illegal, unaccompanied children to California? What the fuck is really going on, Joe?
Strange. It's not just Joe, though. Like, this kind of shit's been going on forever.
U.S. government?
What exactly are you guys doing? Like, what exactly is the plan here? Like, this is the problem that I have with, like, the monetary policy, the defense policies, the immigration policies. I'm like, what exactly is the goal here? Do you guys have a goal? Or are you all just trying to find the best way to posture towards your constituents?
Are you just trying to find something to do with these space blankets? Because we could give them to the fucking homeless. Yeah, we don't have to make gerbil pages. This looks like a fucking Petco.
Oh,
it looks
my
like a fucking
God. This is so crazy.
Central heating.
This is so crazy. This ties in wonderfully with what I would like to bring up, because it ties in mostly with what you were talking about, John, because it has to do. I was listening to this podcast, and the former COO of PayPal, who lives in San Francisco, he just kind of happened to make this comment about how the city had spent $16 million on like 300 tents for homeless people, and I was like, what? That can't be right. Like, he's blowing smoke up my ass right now. Like, I get it. Like, he doesn't like San Francisco or whatever. Maybe he's, like, more right-leaning or whatever. So I do some research. This is true. The city of San Francisco set up what they call a safe, like a safe place. What is it? Safe sleeping villages. Now, San Francisco paid $16.1 million to house just over 300 people in 262 tents with other services such as food. Like, they just say with food and, quote, other services. I've done my best to find out what these other services are.
Porta potty.
It's basically, bathrooms and shower services and maybe some, like, counseling. Like, I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, I was like, okay, wait a minute. 262 tents? $16 million? Now, I get it. Camping equipment is expensive. You know, sometimes them tents can get expensive. A couple $100 a pop. But $16 million?
My question is, one, how long is that supposed to last, that $16 million? Did they already spend it all?
It's spent.
Okay, so what was it, like a month?
They spent that on this one village in one parking lot.
That is enough to give every homeless person in America $32 right now. Dead ass, that is enough to give every fucking homeless person.
So it says here, the 262 tents currently house more than 300 people with some vacancies. Some vacancies. There's some vacant tents in this lot. The funding is only a fraction of more than $300 million the city spends annually on homeless services. The average cost per night is less than what the city pays under a program to shelter homeless people in hotels. Now, I have just learned that with a new bill that the city passed, or that the federal government passed, they will be reimbursing these hotels 100%. So these hotels will be charging, vacation rate to house homeless people in their rooms, and the federal government is going to use taxpayer money to reimburse them 100% of their costs. So, I mean, these are San Francisco hotels. These are expensive fucking hotels. These are like $300 a night hotels.
Like, I can't even afford to go to San Francisco hotels.
Dude, it's insane. Yeah. It's insane.
It's crazy here that they talk about too, like, that they're saying this is unsustainable though, because they do get subsidized from the federal government, but that stopped, I guess, or they're not getting that right now.
No, it's just not. That is specific sleeping village is not eligible for federal reimbursement. Only the hotels.
Because the hotels got the work.
Because the hotels got the hookup.
Yeah, they got the work.
They're a corporation.
Yeah.
This safe sleeping village is just kind of like a city council idea.
It's a pandemic relief.
It's a pandemic relief. This is new. This is something that they felt like they had to do because there was just too many people sleeping out
in the shelters too. They could shut the shelters down because they couldn't do that anymore, so they were trying to get them in.
The city is facing a projected $650 million budget deficit over the next 2 years. So every year they spend half of what their projected deficit for 2 years is on homeless services, and yet they have the second worst homelessness problem in the country, behind only Los Angeles. Now, I'm Los Angeles,
blown away.
Los Angeles has the worst homeless population in the country. I think it's about roughly 28,000 people on any given night sleep just on the streets. That's not just homelessness. That's just people who can't get into a shelter, can't get into any of these other provided services. 28, almost 30,000 people sleep on the streets every night.
Is this not even including people who sleep in their cars?
No, this is not including people. This is not including any of those people.
There's a documentary that we'll link to, and I'll try to bring up the map where they had a heat map they made of all of Los Angeles, and it's color coded by people sleeping in tents, people sleeping on the street, and people sleeping in their cars.
Yep. And if you go to the video, I heard about this a few years ago on another podcast. A gentleman in LA, this video is from about 4 years ago. I just went and cut some clips out. But a gentleman in LA was building little tiny houses for people, for homeless people. And the city wasn't having that.
Lined boulevards of Los Angeles. But a struggling musician from South LA thought he had a creative temporary fix. He crowdfunded $100,000 and built dozens of solar-powered tiny houses to shelter the homeless. But on the morning city officials were gathering to celebrate their new nearly $2 billion plan to end homelessness, police and garbage crews were descending on the tiny homes, ordered by the city to seize and destroy them. Here in the entertainment capital of the world, over half the homeless population will sleep on the streets tonight, far more than in any other American city. There are 28,000 homeless people in just the city of Los Angeles, and the number has hit new record highs in each of the past few years. But LA Mayor Eric Garcetti has a plan.
This is a bold step forward today for Los Angeles. A year ago, I'll be blunt, the city council and the mayor weren't working together on this.
Garcetti introduced a funding proposal in February that would devote nearly $2 billion over the next decade to getting all LA residents off the streets once and for all. But at the time of Garcetti's announcement, dozens of homeless people had already found shelter in the form of solar-powered tiny houses dispersed throughout the neighborhoods of South LA and beyond.
In Los Angeles, a growing movement is having a big impact.
It's an innovative effort to help the homeless.
Giving homes to the homeless.
They were built by a self-described struggling musician named Elvis Summers.
I got involved with building tiny houses because of a woman named Smokey. She's 62 years old, lives in my neighborhood, and as I got to know her, realized that she was sleeping in the dirt, and I decided to build her a tiny house.
In his 20s, Summers was homeless for stretches of time himself. Now the 39-year-old is trying to help his neighbors who have fallen on hard times.
Some other homeless people came by and asked if I could build them one. I didn't have the money, so I figured, let me try one of these crowdfunding things I've seen out there. I mean, it blew my mind. I think I passed 50,000 in the first week. Total, I've raised over 100,000.
Summers has built tiny homes for nearly 40 people, aided by professional contractors and other volunteers who sign up to help through his nonprofit, Starting Human. Each house costs roughly $1,200 for materials.
The houses I build have carpet, 2 windows, a steel reinforced door, smoke detector. It's got a solar panel on the roof, powers 2 light bulbs, and the battery pack has a USB port on it to charge your cell phone, which is huge. An address, American flag.
Summers also equips each of the 6 by 10 foot houses with a camping toilet and even window alarms. He says they were never meant to be a permanent solution, but unlike sleeping on the sidewalk or in a tent, his tiny houses provide the secure foundation residents need to improve their lives.
The tiny houses provide immediate shelter. The houses I build are very sturdy and safe. People can lock their stuff up and know that when they come back from their drug treatment program or a court or finding a job all day, that their stuff is where they left it.
I got my resumes, my shower stuff. Want to not be homeless. Want to order pizzas in my own home. I want a DVD player, man.
He's here to promote, and he's also here to keep on with propaganda.
But as Summers was building houses, anger in the community over growing street homelessness was reaching a boiling point early this year.
These homes were nothing more than a detriment to mine and my neighbors' homes, families, and children, and they created a sense of terror in the residents.
Nestled within dour tent shantytowns, Summers' tiny houses became brightly colored targets for residents who want the homeless out of their backyards.
They had the children walking in the middle of the street and not on the curbside when they're going over the overpasses.
Most of Summers' tiny houses were placed on private land that's been donated to the project, such as a parking lot outside a convenience store and a church in Compton. A handful replaced the tents that have proliferated on freeway overpasses.
They're not right in front of a business. They're not in front of somebody's house, and the sidewalks are extra wide. So, it seemed, as far as public places, the safest, best place to be until I could get land and then take them and put them on property, building a small community.
But LA viewed the houses as a nuisance. In February, the city council amended a sweeps ordinance to allow the tiny houses to be seized without prior notice. On the morning of the 9th, police and garbage trucks descended, towing 3 of the houses to a Bureau of Sanitation lot for disposal.
My phone just blows up by everybody on 42nd Street, just freaking out, like they're throwing us out of the houses. They're telling us they're taking them. Like, what do we do? I mean, they wouldn't let them get their clothes or their medications. They threw them out, left them on the sidewalk. I pleaded with them. I was like, okay, well, look, they have wheel locks on them. Let me unlock the wheels at least, so you don't break them. No, they refused. They just wanted to take them and destroy them.
Summers managed to move 8 of the threatened houses into storage before they were confiscated, but their residents had nowhere to go.
I had to evict 2 veterans who paid their ticket. They shouldn't be homeless, period. Just, I get angry. They did their service. They gave up their dreams so the rest of us can be out here and be a bunch of assholes. There needs to be some respect.
Our community was so negatively impacted by these structures that many of us come together to get them removed. We called Councilman Price's office because we needed him to do something about it.
I don't think living in that box is the alternative to having some housing.
Kern Price is the LA City Councilman who represents the district where the houses were located and who ordered the seizures.
My main objections to the tiny houses, and I really want to call them houses, they're really just boxes. They're multicolored boxes. Is that they're safe, they're not safe, and that they impose real hazards for other neighbors in the community.
How?
People in neighborhoods that are concerned about
their
all of
occupants,
that, their property values, and tiny houses and homeless people in their neighborhood have every right, period, to be pissed off, and I completely agree with them. But you're misdirecting your anger. Direct it to the powers that be that are supposed to be doing their job. My whole issue and cause is that something needs to be done right now until permanent housing does come available.
I think just a temporary fix is a false sense of security, as would the tent be without any real supportive services.
But to homeless people who had escaped tents and moved into the tiny homes, the security they provided seemed anything but false. After the city's sweep, they were forced once again to call the sidewalk home.
I've been homeless like 2 years.
One of the guys, Willie, who's an engineer who I gave the Red House to, he used to have it right here.
In the house you feel secure because you lock your door.
After Willie Hadnot's house was seized by the city, he went back to living in a tent above the 110 freeway.
I try to cover it up, as much as I can, but after you take and cut it with a razor blade, it's not too much security you have at all. You know it's coming. You know that they really don't care for you too much. They said, first thing the officer told me, he said, well, get a job. I said, can you help me get one? I'm willing to work. It's not really hard in those jobs for a 59-year-old man, I'm 59 years old.
We've offered housing to individuals who are willing to come in and frequently the response is, well, I don't want to go to the shelter, I just want to stay here on the street.
There are a fraction of shelter space to how many people are homeless, but otherwise the shelters are dirty. It's dangerous in there, the food is not good, it's got bed bugs, you can't go with a girlfriend, pets, or any of your personal items.
I'm not suggesting that the shelters are the answer. It obviously is a temporary step, an alternative step. I think it's a better step than someone sleeping on a sidewalk under a bench or on a bench. I think the way you make it better is having some kind of coordinated services where you can refer people to the kind of assistance they need, as opposed to giving them a structure, letting them think that they've got it, that they're okay now because they're sitting in a little box, and that their problems are going to be solved.
When the city took those 3 houses, they chose to do it at the exact same time that the council and the mayor were at City Hall unveiling the mayor's new homeless $1.87 billion plan.
This is an important policy statement, and I think it's going to provide with a roadmap of a variety of areas.
Of course.
We are beginning to make a difference.
The same dumbass
and a difference that is long overdue. We've identified some action items and working closely with the county, and so we're working really in collaboration in ways that we haven't before. We have identified a need to come up with some funds, a specific number of some funding for a prolonged period of time.
Everything that they have been doing, and doesn't work. It's just years of circles and bureaucratic holds and wait times, and like, I would like them to care. 10, 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, where's all the housing?
Mayor Garcetti's plan focuses on permanent supportive housing, aiming to build 10,000 units for homeless families over the next decade. But in the meantime, LA is taking funds away from temporary shelters.
The tiny houses are, a cheap, effective, immediate step. And as long as they are, managed in small communities, that would be best.
Currently, Los Angeles owns thousands of vacant lots that could provide locations for micro-housing villages like those that already exist in several other cities, including Portland, Seattle, Austin, and elsewhere.
I mean, not only they could open a few up that have been sitting there for decades that we could build communities on, but open up a warehouse and stop chastising the homeless for collecting the good citizens' garbage. Encourage them, give them a job doing it.
Well, we're trying to come up with some solutions. We're looking at letting people stay in parking lots, for example. People that are in vehicles to park in parking lots. Perhaps that could be a good location for tents, for other types of temporary shelters.
Every Angelino deserves a safe place to sleep at night.
The mayor's office says that though the city appreciates citizens' creative solutions to end homelessness, he does not support opening a surplus lot for Elvis Summers or other tiny house village concepts until the city has some more time to study the issue.
What? We're gonna halt all Muslim immigration until we can figure this thing out.
We gotta figure this out. 100. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things. That Councilman Price, who was the schmuck that we were laughing at, I thought that his word choice was so important to focus on there, because he talked about how living in a box, to use his words, wouldn't solve their problems unless there was some sort of, quote, coordinated services that could accompany the temporary fix. Basically what he's saying is, unless we can be involved and get a cut of the slice, a little slice of the pie, then we don't like the solution.
So there's some contracting.
We don't like that there's $100,000 going to a GoFundMe through this private organization. We need to make sure that we have some way
we need a profit incentive.
We got to make sure that it's okay and that
we need to make our deal with Holiday Inn Express to get our little cutback so that Holiday Inn Express get paid, we get paid.
They didn't talk about it in this video, but on the podcast where I heard this podcast about a year ago, and as I said, this video itself is from about 4 years ago. This man, Elvis Summers, is still doing this. He still has a GoFundMe and stuff that you can, like a nonprofit that you can donate to.
4 years ago?
4 years ago.
I ain't seen a single motherfucking house in LA.
Nope.
I ain't seen not one goddamn.
Have you seen the number drastically go down due to the coordinated efforts of parking lot tents?
They said they were going to build 10,000 over a decade.
As a matter of fact, 10,000 units in 10 years.
That's 1,000 units a year.
Even though that's a third of the amount of units that they need. And we know that it's exceedingly difficult to build anything in Los Angeles.
No, fuck that, dude. I know companies here in Nevada or in LA that'll build a skyscraper in a year. Yeah, bro, they built a whole skyscraper in a year.
I saw a Costco go up in my hometown in 3 months.
Yep. You know what I'm saying?
Gas station and everything, my man.
In 4 years, and they still haven't built a single fucking house out there.
Now, I would just like to tie these two stories together, because like I told you guys at the beginning, I did a little bit of math. So the city of San Francisco spent $16.1 million for 262 tents, food, and, quote, other services. Now, I calculated if those boxes, as Price said, cost $1,200 for materials, and just being generous, let's say it cost them $800 in labor to put them together, so $2,000. If you multiply that by 262, which is the number of tents in that safe sleeping village, that's $524,000. To have 262 steel reinforced locked doors with solar energy and fucking smoke detectors on wheels. That's less than $500,000. So somehow the city of San Francisco was able to spend $15.6 million more on 262 tents and food and quote, other services.
AKA how much it cost me to get a piece of chalk and draw a circle in this parking space that you ain't supposed to come out of.
That is just a perfect example
where the money goes
of how the government can't make anything less expensive, because all the government does is do things that people are already doing. So this man, Elvis Summers, is already building houses for homeless people. The government comes in and they want to do that same thing. But they have to pay everybody that works in that department some money so that they can have a job and do all. So all of that is overhead on top of the cost of just making the tents or making the housing and stuff like that. Like, it can't be done this way. I watched a few other videos and it's just like ridiculous. They don't talk about it in this video, but the city made Elvis Summers bid on a contract to do, I guess it was part of this $2 billion thing that they were going to do. They had contracts going out to other services and corporations to make housing structures for homeless people, temporary housing structures. They made him bid on a contract with these giant corporations for getting this stuff to do. And according to him in this podcast, he said that he underbid everybody so much that they didn't take him. They wanted it to be more.
They wanted their slice. Yeah.
Because
they have to spend
the money. If you don't spend the money, then the money gets diverted from your department to somebody else's department. And if that happens too many years in a row, your pay gets cut. Your hours get cut. People get laid off. So the people in the government have their own personal incentives that play into the policies that they will implement to help these people, quote unquote, help these people. And it's like, he didn't like this, and it just goes to show, like, he didn't like the idea of temporary fixes unless it involved him in some way. Unless he had some way to make money off of it, i.e. getting paid to do his job, which is being involved in these services, he didn't like it. If he can't be a part of it, he don't want it. He likes the idea of letting people sleep in parking lots in tents,
and it'll take them $2
as long
billion.
as he's a part of it.
It'll take them $2 billion. That man came. Look here.
You know what? In 2016, they passed that $2 billion thing. That was after 10 years ago they had passed another similar thing, and it just dwindled away.
That's enough.
It had absolutely zero effect.
That's enough to buy 4 tiny homes for every single homeless person in America.
It's crazy.
Based off of Elvis and the 2000, like, literally. So it's like, I can't even imagine. Like, I keep thinking about Brazil and the favelas and the slums that take up the whole swaths of the hillside of the mountains, you know?
Yep.
And that's because the government there is like, okay, poor people, you can go build your own shit on the hills, you know? And so they congregated in this area and they built these massive slums. In America, you can't do that. They won't let you just go build on somebody's fucking property because, you know, in America, somebody owns everything.
Everything.
So you just are forced to live in underpasses and on the streets and things like that. But here comes a guy who says, I can build them all homes. And you know, if that guy can do it on a small scale, of course you can do it on a grand scale. Think about how many shipping containers there are in America that are 100%. Unused right now. Let's say that there's easy a half million shipping containers. How much would it cost to take a 500,000 shipping containers, build these areas where these people could live, give them food and it's less than $2 billion. I guarantee you it's less than $2 billion.
Let me show you a private solution. Here goes a private solution. This is John Paul DeJoria. You might know this man as the Paul Micheal, the guy who started Paul Micheal Salon Products.
That guy's name isn't Paul Micheal?
No, he teamed up with another guy, Paul Micheal. Paul Mitchell's the salon.
He had a way better name too.
So he's co-founder of that and a co-founder of Patron. So he's a billionaire, and he came together with some people to create this solution outside Austin.
Oh, they referenced this in the video. Yeah.
This is like kind of the heart of Mobile Loaves and Fishes, which he started. His dream was, and it's coming to fruition now. What if we took the homeless off the street and gave them their own home and gave them a way to work, to do something nice, to be in a community where they're respected and they're loved and appreciated, and we help them with all of their challenges? Wouldn't that be a wonderful idea?
Tell a little bit about where we're standing right now.
So we're standing in the middle of the outdoor Alamo Draft House movie theater, surrounded by a 20-unit B&B. And this is a place where the entire city of Austin is welcome to come in here. Every Friday night is free movie night. And connecting people in order to transform the paradigm as to how they view the stereotype of the homeless is the key, that human-to-human, heart-to-heart connection. That's the magic of this place.
So where are we going to now?
This is our community market. Come on in. In addition to it being just a small little convenience store, actually showcases products that are manufactured here on site, like our blacksmith, bottle openers right here, or wood products, art, and virtually 100% of the money goes into their pockets.
So let's say your rent's $90 and you don't have any money, there's no subsidy. We figure out a way here for you to make some money, whether it's through our wood shop, metal shop, animal husbandry, whatever. So everybody contributes, you feel like they're part of it.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
Nobody wants a subsidy, man. People want to be purposeful. We're created to work, every human being. And when we strip people of that opportunity and reduce them to begging, guess what we get? And we get what we have culturally here in this country.
Summed it up real nice.
And so right now we're headed into the microhome area, a beautiful architecturally designed, built by some of the best custom home builders in Austin, Texas. Every unit is fully furnished with a refrigerator, freezer, microwave, crock pot, coffee maker, everything that you see in here. This is ready to
They're
move
doing
into.
tents.
This is really pretty.
Yeah.
Nice. And your bathrooms there, your kitchen's there, your shower's right outside?
Yeah, right there.
All convenient.
Yeah.
And it's warm in here. It's cold outside, it's warm in here.
What about this place do you find to be most unique?
It gives someone a chance that didn't think they had a chance in life to actually have a chance, be respected, be appreciated, and become part of society again, and people that truly care, that really love what they're doing and what they're doing for these people. And that's him and all of his followers.
So here, right here is the basic catalyst of our farming movement. And then this is all organically grown. And every Saturday, we have a farmer's market right up underneath that shed.
One of the key things you think about when you're homeless is how am I going to eat? And if they could eat with proper food, everything from within starts working a little bit better, you feel better. So I thought we need some food here, so we provided it. You know, I'm just counting here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of you, okay? So what we're going to do is this. On behalf of them, I'm going to write you a check for $10, $20, $30, $40, $50, $60,000. $10,000 for every single person right here.
Really nice to see you, JP.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
That's the private solution. Yep. That's what happens when people actually give a shit about what happens on the back end of their quote-unquote policies.
It's crazy.
When people actually care. And notice, he was talking about things that go way beyond just the idea of putting someone in a shelter. He was talking about connecting them with other human beings, giving them a purpose, giving them some sort of sense of belonging. All of these metaphysical needs that we have as human beings that don't come into play at all when the city or the federal government comes in and they're like, we're gonna put them in a shelter and we're gonna give them drug services and stuff like that. And it's like, well, that's not what they need. They don't need you to wean them off of the drugs that they're using to like abate the numbness, like to help them with the trauma that they experience. They need somebody to help them through the trauma so that they don't need the drugs in the first place. Not for you to come around and be like, hey, we got your Suboxone for today.
Yeah.
Here, take it.
And that congressman or that city selectman or whatever the fuck he was, he's not thinking about on the hierarchy of needs the stuff that's below. Yeah, give him a tent and give him a parking space and a porta potty and here's some shit on a shingle. You should be fine. It's like, no, there's a lot more in that hierarchy of needs that you need to address. There's mental health. There's drug abuse.
They're not safe.
It's like, what are you?
Well, you don't give a fuck about their safety.
I loved how he
bullshit.
said that. Yeah, he was like, they're not safe, and I'm like, well, they're a lot safer than a tent.
Sleeping in a tent.
You have a steel reinforced deadbolt door. That's a lot. You have a smoke detector. You have solid walls that they can't cut through with a razor blade.
And that lady was like, "It's now our kids can't walk on the sidewalk." I hear you, lady. But you shouldn't be blaming the guy that's trying to put the homeless people with a roof over the head. You should be blaming the city who's like, we just are not going to give them a place to go.
We'll have somewhere for them in 10 years.
Yeah, in 10 years, we're
give
going
me
to
$2 billion, and in 10 years, they'll have somewhere to go.
I want to get back to the money because, like you said, it's different. It's a whole different approach in a sense of it's more comprehensive and somebody actually cares. Where we do see this, I'm so glad we're talking about this because this is it kind of highlights a lot of how I've always seen the system and why I'm anti-government in a sense, right? Not that I don't think that it's like I'm not against helping people. It's just that we obviously see that in a lot of these situations, those people in those that are in charge of these programs and things do not have our best, like, that interest aligned in a sense, right? So nonetheless, I would love to get more hands and money in the hands of the people like John Paul DeJoria who are making these places. But back to the money situation, $16 million to make 262 tents. Okay. Now, I've looked at a couple other places too, mainly one in Colorado. They were also doing tiny homes. I'll admit they weren't as nice as those homes, right? But still, each tiny home was $10,000. Okay, so now if we're just using that as a baseline, maybe this one's a little more, but still, they said they had 20 units on that property at $10,000 a piece. That means that place, just the houses alone, were about $200,000. So you could see that probably all in an entire complex like that with a community store, a garden, everything, you're probably looking at $500,000, maybe.
And that's nothing. And on top of that, we're talking about buying grams. Like, let's get some ounces. Let's buy bulk. let's throw. I mean, I'm sure if you could get that much for $500,000, think about how much you could get for $1 billion.
I was just thinking about that. I was like, I wonder how much money they've spent in developing that particular place. I would not be at all surprised to find out that even with the refrigerator, the freezer, the crock pot, the personal showers, the fucking market, the woodworking shop, everything that they've invested in, I wouldn't be surprised if it was less than $16 million.
It is. It's like I just did the math. Less. It's probably 500. It's probably maybe $1 million.
Yeah.
Maybe $1 million. Maybe $2 million. But we're still talking about a 16th of what it cost the city of San Francisco
to house 300 people
to throw up some fucking tents,
some tents in a parking lot.
And it's crazy. And to think that LA had a budget of 1.7 billion, maybe 2 billion, and the scariest part of it all is we're printing money to do nothing with it, to shove it into the politicians' pockets. Yeah. And then that hyperinflation, all these things, stock market crashes, all this stuff, it comes back on our head. And it's crazy.
I want to know how much a Los Angeles City Council member makes.
Yeah, I thought that too.
That's interesting.
How much does that price guy make?
That dude is making guap.
Yeah, not to mention all of the connections. I mean, think about it. These people, they do speeches afterwards. They do lobbying afterwards. Like, once you're in the system is going to fucking...
Not to mention, like you said, the kickbacks. The reason they want to be able to implement the program is because they're going to make the contract with the hotel, right? And then that's why they don't want you to do tents and shit. That's why the federal government wants the hotels to be reimbursed.
And the reason that these members of our Congress keep getting scared to make these big changes is because they want re-election.
Yeah.
It's all about re-election because there's no term limits.
Right.
So, like, all of these problems are intertwined.
Right. I completely agree.
Oh my God.
Let me guess. Bro. Let me guess. Are we talking about annual salary?
Yeah.
$163,000 a year.
That's very close. This is an article in LA Weekly from 2008.
Damn.
City council salaries amounted to $171,648 a year plus benefits.
Damn.
That's not their whole, like, the $171,000 is not even their entire compensation package. It's more than that, because you can imagine in a place like LA, the kind of healthcare benefits you get, the kind of benefits you get would make that a $300,000 annual salary.
Think about your district too. What if your district is like some really affluent district?
They are the highest paid city council members in the nation.
Damn, it's crazy.
I was only $8,000 off.
You were so close. You know what? The crazy thing about it too is, like, listen to these guys talk about their situation. Like you said, we got a garden, we got this services. Like when I heard the other dude talk about, like, they had the guy in there. This dude was building electric bikes in his little unit, trying to sell them and stuff. And they were talking about how, like, they don't implement programs where, like, they don't force you to get sober to be in these places and stuff, because it goes against like, if you don't get sober, then you get kicked out of your home, and it's like, that's not what we're trying to do here. They encourage you to, and there's, like, things that will allow you to do that or help you to get there, but they don't force it. Anyways, clear, concise plans of how to execute those things. When you listen to these politicians talk about the shit that they're going to do, what do they say? They're just like, well, we need services.
We've been coming up with numbers for funding for an extended amount of time.
They get that
numbers?
They get that fireplace
extended
thing.
amount of time.
They get the fireplace thing, and they just blow smoke.
They just blow smoke. They restate the problem. You know what I mean? It's just like anything when like an interview where you, like, re-say the question to buy yourself some time. They're like, well, I'll tell you what we can do for homelessness. It's a really big problem out here. What we need is this. Yeah, we know what we need, motherfucker. That's what we're talking to you for. What are you going to do? What are you doing? And he said, well, there's parking lots.
As long as they have a vehicle, I could see them sleeping in a parking lot.
You don't fucking know. You're
not going to give them a house.
Problem.
You don't have the box.
And you're the guy who's working in tandem with the mayor to create the so-called $2 billion program.
Yep.
And yet you don't know a fucking thing that's in the program.
And bro, I seen the plans, the AutoCAD 3D design plans for these 10,000 units that they're building over the next 10 years. It's a fucking high-rise luxury apartment complex.
That's what the homeless people need.
That's like, and I'm not like, let me tell you right now, that place that we just watched for the Paul DeJoria guy, that place was fancy as fuck. This blows it out of the fucking water. Like, it looked like something that you'd see on the campus of a brand new university.
It's like I'm homeless now.
Like, yeah, for real. And I was like, well, no wonder it's going to take you 10 fucking years. You're going to put granite countertops in all these motherfuckers. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
The Colorado place that I saw was nice, too.
And it's not the problem. Like, and I think it would really, when you get down to the root of it, like the idea of not forcing someone to become sober to get into this community is so key. Because the problem is that, or the solution there is that they are providing everything that someone would need to get off of drugs.
To heal themselves.
To not need the drugs in the first place.
Yeah.
That's the same thing that they did in Portugal when they legalized all of these hard drugs and they allowed you a safe, clean place to come in and do heroin. You could come in every single day as much as you want and do heroin for free. And guess what? Only 6% of people why can't I think of the word? Consecutively came in for more than 6 months at a time. Within 6 months, 94% of every single person that went into that clinic to get heroin stopped doing heroin.
Because they addressed the disease and not the symptoms.
Exactly.
So instead of saying like, oh, we're going to build a gigantic structure for homeless people to live in, but we're going to really enforce anti-drugs, and if we catch you on drugs, we kick your ass out.
And you're not allowed to bring any of your things in here.
Yeah, so you're addressing homelessness as a symptom, not as a disease. If you address it as a disease and say we're going to house you and try to give you access to all these treatments, it's going to be like Portugal.
Yeah. I want to bring up that this dude, here we go. Scoot up.
This is the Colorado one.
Yep. We got to watch it just because of what we're talking about now, because he brings
up
around
the
key
country
stat.
in the wake
You'll
of
know
the
it when you hear
recession
it.
caused by COVID-19. From Philadelphia to Portland, officials are working to move people from encampments into shelters. But some advocates for the homeless say the emergency shelter model isn't working. Instead, they endorse what's called a housing first approach, giving people forced into homelessness a permanent place to live. And those advocates say the change has reduced homelessness in places like New Orleans, New York, and Colorado, where Burry Peterson reports.
Some things are obvious at this busy Denver construction site, like how these 14 units are so small, they are called tiny houses. And the not so obvious, that these tiny houses may make a big difference in solving homelessness.
Housing solves homelessness. And so the only way that we're going to solve homelessness is to continue building housing.
How much space are we talking about here?
96 square feet. There will also be a front porch that attaches here in front of the double doors.
Cole Chandler is an ordained Mennonite minister who organized and now runs the tiny house project called Colorado Village Collaborative.
So we provide people their own space, their own four walls, their own door that they can lock, a place that they can store their things, keep their pets, and rebuild their lives.
The first 11-unit tiny house project was built 3 years ago. A shared kitchen, shower, and bathroom are all in one building.
It's tough on the streets when you don't have a place to take care of yourself and rest and do all that.
Being here offered Robert a way off the streets.
I have my own bed, I have a table there to eat and study, and my own fridge, and I would say it's spacious enough for a person to live in, and have space to keep all their storage and stuff in.
With 5,000 homeless in Denver, these are meant to be a transition to long-term housing, like this 31-unit apartment building in Boulder, Colorado, that was built to give the homeless a permanent place to live. Where we met Ray Vose, who builds electric bikes in his apartment that can sell for about $1,800.
Oh, my word.
These are the electric bikes?
This is the current project.
This is amazing.
Yeah, that one there is my daily driver right now.
Wow. What was the worst night or the worst day
buy a bike from this motherfucker
that you had when you were homeless, Ray?
I was sitting in a bar, spending my last $2 and change on a beer. It was cold. And, you know, just remember reading stories about freezing to death. You know, it's not that painful. You know, you feel warm. I was considering it.
Giving up?
Yeah.
Just going out and freezing to death?
Yeah.
Now Vose has a place of his own. Here, residents sign a lease and pay rent as a portion of any income, such as Social Security or disability. Greg Harms, CEO of Boulder Shelter for the Homeless, lays out the rules.
Just like anybody else who lives in an apartment, if you're going to have your friends over and have loud parties, that's not acceptable, right? If you're going to trash your apartment, that's not acceptable. If you don't pay your rent, that's not acceptable. As long as you meet the obligations of your lease while you're staying here, you know, you're welcome to stay.
Once there is housing, then comes dealing with problems like alcohol and drug abuse, illness, unemployment.
So there's not a requirement that you become sober. There's not a requirement that you get on your meds. There's not a requirement that you find employment. Because what we found is when you put those requirements in place, then people are inevitably not able to meet one of those requirements, and their housing is in jeopardy. And that's not the goal. The goal is to keep them housed.
What happens with my next Social Security check?
Housing First has its critics, chief among them Robert Marbut Jr., President Trump's executive director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. He favors heavy policing, like that seen in cities that have dismantled homeless housing on the streets. But Housing First actually cuts down costs of police time dealing with the homeless and housing the homeless in jail. What do the studies show about the cost of housing versus the cost of law enforcement?
Well, to house somebody in a permanent supportive housing program is $15,000 to $20,000. The cost if they're on the streets is probably about $40,000, $45,000. Half, less than half.
Michael Doherty is the Boulder County DA. Why is this better for the community?
I think we're all better served having a place where homeless individuals can stay a night, be connected to resources and housing that they need. And I think that's a better long-term approach. It makes fiscal sense, and it's also more humane.
The hardest sell is to neighbors who fear violence. What do you say then, Greg, to people who look at the idea of putting something like this in their neighborhood and they're like, no, we don't want, you know, drug users and alcoholics, and we don't want police coming all day and all night?
It hasn't been our reality. And if you look at the crime map of Boulder, the area that we're in right now is probably one of the safest and least crime reported areas in the city.
Yeah, the people tend to have this idea that like homeless people are homeless because they're criminals, and I'm like, no, you have that backwards. They're criminals because they're homeless. They don't have anything, so they have to go and steal and rob, and they do drugs, and for some reason drugs are illegal. So that makes all of them, anybody that's doing drugs while being homeless, that immediately makes them a criminal. And in a lot of places, being homeless is just a crime. So it's actually the opposite. It's the fact that they are homeless that leads them to criminality, not the other way around.
Yes, and homelessness is like a reason to use drugs. I'm not giving anyone an excuse, but like people who are homeless take drugs to deal with the fact that they're homeless.
Yeah.
Like they're not doing them because they're like, oh boy, I can't wait for that.
You want to escape. It's escapism.
Exactly.
You're trying to escape that horrific reality that you live in.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the money. You know what I mean? The money. Like, I don't care about the morality. Like, if you're like, well, you're a trippy like tree hugger dude or whatever. It's not about care to me. Like, we can all agree on it costs more to criminalize all these things.
Yep.
Not just, we're talking drugs. We're talking immigration. We're talking homelessness. When you say, oh, I want to make that a crime and I want to enforce, penalties upon them through law enforcement, $40,000. Like you said, it costs money to put to house all these immigrants in some type of immigration jail, to house these homeless people in prison,
shelter.
You know what I mean?
Prison.
Like, that's going to cost you money anyways, just for it not to work, just for it to end up with more people. You got to pay the salaries of the police that are going to run around. Now you want to be safe But you can't be safe because now the guy who's trying to break into your house is over there trying to round up some innocent young dude on the street.
Yep.
Or probably old, but still just some innocent dude on the street. That's where your cops are, you know?
Yep.
And you're like, it's just
and it's
crazy.
it's really interesting to see too, like these are private companies.
Yeah.
Private nonprofit organizations and stuff like that. So it's like, even if you don't give a flying fuck about homeless people, it's still better to have these types of solutions, because then your tax money doesn't go to paying for it. Then you want stuff like this. You want some sort of a private organization to be able to come in and fix the problem rather than the government, because one, the government doesn't fix it, and two, the government uses your money to fix it.
Yep. There's also examples of homeless getting together and founding their own little towns, like Slab City.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a army base that was abandoned, all the buildings dilapidated, they just were pretty much busted down to their concrete foundations, and a bunch of homeless people got together and decided to make a city.
Yep.
And within that city, do you know what they have? A functioning government. They have a voting system. They have marketplaces, gardens, all of these
entertainment
things.
areas.
Entertainment
like
areas.
You can go play shows out of Slab City and stuff.
100%. So
Movie theater.
The government they could help facilitate an answer by gathering up the funds and putting it in the hands of people who want to solve the crisis, but they're obviously not trying to solve this problem.
Nope.
Yeah.
They're not.
And you know what? My last point to this would be, even if they're not going to solve the problem, then get the fuck out the way. You know what I mean? Don't
100%.
go in and try and bulldoze the people who are trying to create the solutions to the problems and all that stuff. Like, if you're just going to, it's
and
crazy.
that's how it's the incentives in the system are so flawed, because the only reason that they went in to seize those tiny homes that Elvis Summers built was because one of Councilman Price's constituents, somebody that would vote for him to be reelected to his cushy $170,000 a year job, came in and was angry that there were some colorful boxes on her fucking, not even on her property. He said he only put a handful of them on public property, and they were all on overpasses. So it's like
in her neighborhood.
The kids couldn't walk on the sidewalk.
Fucking
and it's like,
Karen.
well, bitch, why don't you give your fucking kid a ride to school then? How about that?
This motherfucker's shitting in a camping toilet.
Yeah. I watched this
You know
other
what I'm
video
saying?
of a guy.
You know what I'm saying?
Another video of a guy had, it was a different kind of a shelter. It was just like a more structured tent kind of thing, but it was like one big tent where they were just like bunk beds and stuff, like another shelter kind of idea. He lost his leg due to amputation because he caught a staph infection while he was doing like some sort of work on Skid Row in LA.
Wow.
Because he had come into contact with human feces.
Wow.
Because there's just human feces all over Skid Row.
All over the street.
And because they don't have anywhere to shit.
Rats the size of this keyboard. I've seen them.
Literally, I've been in Skid Row.
Yep,
there is literally just like the most. You would think that you would get gotten transported to a third world country,
Honestly.
like you were in the middle of the Congo or something like that.
Yep.
It is appalling. And then you think like literally decades of government funding has been pumped into these issues, and they only get worse.
Yeah.
California's homeless problem has only gotten worse, and they
act like they don't know what the solution is.
They keep spending more and more money. For some reason, they think like, well, if $2 billion didn't work, maybe if we do $2.5 billion, it'll work. And then it keeps getting worse, and they're like, well, maybe $3 billion. And
where's the money go?
Where's the money?
It's going to militarizing our police so they can run down
Yeah.
Skid Row in a fucking Kanye, Wyoming mega tank.
Every single one of those dudes had a fucking paintball gun and shit, and I was like, oh, come on, yo.
crazy.
Like, what the fuck?
My takeaways from this conversation, speaking about the financial collapse, the social safety net, and where people eventually end up, which is 500,000 of them on the streets. My biggest takeaway here is like there are solutions. There are solutions to inflation. There are solutions to misuse of government funds in the food stamp program and unemployment benefits. There are solutions to homelessness. It's just those solutions do not currently have a profit incentive. And our entire system in America is based off of profits. So maybe we find a way to get some money out of these homeless people. I don't know. Like, what else is it? What's the fucking answer? Like, like this guy was talking about in one of these videos, about homeless people living in this kind of low-income housing and paying rent based on a percentage of whatever income they can have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like a viable solution.
Yep.
These guys in these tiny home communities that are being put to work within the tiny home communities, well, that's a positive feedback loop. You just have them build more houses.
Yep.
And then the more people come in, you got more workers and you build more and more houses.
Yeah.
So there are creative solutions to these problems. And our government is willfully ignoring those creative solutions so that they can get more money. Even though it looks like they're spending more money, which they are, oh, you better believe that money comes right back into their motherfucking pockets.
Yeah. No, the $2 billion doesn't come out of Councilman Price's pay.
No, it does not. It certainly does not come out of our bullet fund.
No, for sure. Where I'm at with it is I'm reminded again that, you know, you got to do what's hard sometimes.
Yep.
You know, you got to do the hard things
Satori,
sometimes.
right?
Yeah, it's Kensho or Satori.
Kensho
You're gonna learn one way or the other. You're gonna grow one way or the other. And a lot of people avoid the growth that comes from making sacrifices and doing things the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, I would encourage all of us to look and realize how easy we have had it, and ask, like, what price are we paying to have it that easy, and if that's actually worth it. Like, if we should take the time to pay back our deficits, you know what I mean? Like, and maybe, you know, take a hit in our economy in a little bit in the ways that we spend money frivolously and stuff like that, so that we can fix some of these issues that have been growing and festering and moldering, you know, even all the way from, it's not just politicians, right? Like, I would love for the politicians to do it, especially, and to do the risky thing that might not get you elected, but is the right thing to do, you know, and things like that too. I would love to see it there. But even in our own individual instances where it's like, you know, maybe you take your stimulus check, and instead of putting it into stocks and Bitcoin and things to further your own self-interest, you maybe donate it to one of these homeless programs or something that, you know, can help the situations that we all are experiencing and know that happen, but often just kind of like you said earlier, or that we've seen in this, is you push it on to the future, you know, and it's like, well, you know, when it becomes an issue, then I'll deal with it, and then you push it off until, you know, somebody's got to pay that. And one of my favorite fucking sayings all time comes from Dr. Strange, right? And when he says, the bill comes due. Always, man. Always comes due. So somebody's going to have to pay for these choices that we're making. And if we could all just think about that person, you know, that would be great.
Yeah. For me, my biggest takeaway is the immense similarities that we see in these homeless shelter programs, like the one in Colorado and the one in Austin, where, like you said, you have people come in, their only responsibility is to help that community become better, and then it grows and it grows and it grows. But isn't it interesting that looks a lot like what society used to be before mass people lived in cities, before, you know, like, people were growing their own food, people were building their own goods and selling it to the people that live next door to them and shit like that. Like, small communities seem to work better for the people that are in them, rather than this amorphous idea. Like, we've lived here now in this is a small neighborhood. We've lived in this neighborhood for the last 3 months. I don't know a single person's name that lives next door to me. Not one.
I wave at the old lady on the corner.
There's a very nice old couple that I would love to get to know better. They're planting fruit trees. They're male. They talk all the time. They seem like really awesome people. There's some people in here that I get some really bad vibes from. Yeah. But the idea that reconnecting, like, it's those base elements that I think that we're losing focus on. And I think that, if anything, like, that's the thing that it gets me out of this conversation, is, like, more than the economics, more than the policies, it's the fact that people need to have purpose, and people need to feel like they belong somewhere, and people need to feel like they are contributing to their communities. And if we can set up places for people to do that, not only can the homeless people thrive in those areas, but the people who make millions of dollars and are still completely abjectly like, have a horrible life internally, those people can also get the same benefits, because money doesn't make you happy. Money just solves the problems that money can solve. But having purpose, feeling connected to other human beings, that will make you happy.